I swear I could almost hear her teeth grind when she stepped away from me that morning in our kitchen. It was subtle, but the tension in Carol's jaw spoke volumes. She made a big show of ignoring me, busying herself with stacking dishes while I just stood there, trying to figure out why she'd been dodging me for months. Ever since I left construction work, my back still throbs from that damned fall. Our marriage's temperature dropped to near freezing. One day she's sweet, asking about my fishing trips in Wyoming's clear rivers. The next, she's all sneering comments about how I should find something more useful to do. That morning, though, something else was in the air. She barely slept in our bedroom anymore, claiming she was too stressed about loan payments on her new clinic. But as she slammed plates around, it hit me that this wasn't just stress. It was like she was boiling with contempt, and I was about to be scalded by it. I tried to lighten the mood, maybe invite her to talk. She whipped around and snapped, "Don't stand there like a lost puppy. Make yourself helpful for once." The venom in her voice stunned me more than any broken bone I've had to endure on a job site. I could feel the old scars on my back tighten, a reminder of how I used to break my body to provide for us. She marched out the door to go work on a Saturday. Dentists around here don't usually pull weekend shifts, so that alone set my nerves on edge. I was used to her late nights, sure, but heading out at dawn on a Saturday? My instincts screamed that something wasn't right. When she left, I noticed her phone charger was still plugged in beside the couch. Carol is obsessive about her phone. She guards it like a state secret, so forgetting the charger felt like more than an accident. I tried to shrug it off, but a knot in my stomach refused to untangle. I headed to the garage and tried to immerse myself in fiddling with my fishing gear, but my mind just kept drifting back to that glimpse of raw hostility in her eyes. A few hours later, I found myself parked outside a hardware store. I told Carol I needed new tools, but in truth, I just couldn't bear being cooped up in that lonely, tension-soaked house. While standing in line, I overheard a conversation behind me. A woman describing her own marriage woes, specifically how distant her partner had become right before she learned about his double life. My pulse hammered in my ears. My thoughts flicked to Carol's sudden lack of affection, 8 months of near-total rejection. The timelines, the excuses, the attitude. It was all swirling in my head, telling me something big was brewing. When I got home, an uneasy calm had settled over the place. She still wasn't back. Hours later, still no word. Normally, I'd try to reach her, but I couldn't handle another barrage of snark, so I just sat on the couch, flipping through the TV without actually watching. That's when I spotted her calendar pinned to the fridge. She'd left it open on a page about prenatal appointments. My heart skipped a beat. We hadn't been close in, well, forever. Could she really be pregnant? And why hadn't she breathed a word about it to me? I stayed up, didn't close my eyes even once, waiting for her to come home and expecting some explanation. Midnight passed, then 2 in the morning. She finally slipped through the door at dawn, a faint trace of unfamiliar cologne around her. When I asked about the calendar page, her response was a disdainful laugh so cold it felt like a slap. "You need to mind your own damn business, Kevin," she hissed before vanishing into the bathroom. That single line was enough to send a chill through my spine. Mind my own business about a pregnancy note on her calendar? My stomach churned with dread. It was like standing on the edge of a very high, rickety scaffold, bracing for a fall. But I had no idea just how far I was about to plunge. I was still reeling from Carol's icy dismissal when I found a crumpled piece of paper shoved behind the microwave. Normally, I wouldn't bother poking around there, but I'd knocked the appliance while making coffee and heard the distinct rustle of something slipping. I fished it out, expecting maybe a grocery list or a coupon. Instead, it was a receipt for a high-end dinner, steaks, wine, and dessert for 2. And the date? Last Saturday. The same Saturday she told me she was stuck at the clinic. My heart drummed so hard I worried I might pass out. Carol and I hadn't shared a decent meal together in ages. She kept ranting about our finances, accusing me of being dead weight ever since my back injury. So who was footing the bill? More importantly, who was she dining with? My hands shook, the words on the receipt swimming. A single question pounded in my brain. Am I the world's biggest fool for not seeing all this sooner? I tucked the receipt away in my pocket, refusing to confront her until I had a clearer picture of what I was dealing with. Instead, I started looking for more signs, something I never imagined I'd do. I rummaged through the glove compartment in her car, checked the trunk, even peeked into the pockets of her lab coats. It felt wrong, like the worst kind of betrayal, but every fiber of my being told me she'd already crossed that line. And I sure found plenty. Random credit card slips for lunches she never mentioned, a small bottle of men's cologne. My throat tightened. There was no way I could chalk that up to normal. At the same time, Carol grew bolder. She'd come home with stories about emergency procedures at the clinic that conveniently popped up whenever I tried to talk to her. One night, she breezed in around midnight wearing brand new shoes she never showed me purchasing. When I asked where they came from, she just scoffed like it was beneath her to explain. The next morning, she flat out accused me of overstepping by asking questions about her schedule. It was a chilling shift in her attitude, like I was nothing more than an unwanted tenant in my own house. Things got even stranger when her parents called, excitedly asking how I felt about some big blessing. Apparently, Carol had hinted that they might be grandparents sooner than they thought. I froze, my tongue as dry as sand. I managed to mumble something about not being sure yet, but even that felt like a lie I was forced to tell. Their enthusiasm only fueled my dread. If Carol was pregnant, how could it possibly be mine? We hadn't shared any physical closeness in over 8 months. And yet her parents, who practically run their church, were praising this as some miracle from above. I found myself unable to breathe, like the air in the room was suffocating me. It wasn't just that I suspected I was being played for a fool. It was the knowledge that Carol was clever enough to weaponize her parents' fervent faith to shield her secrets. If there was a baby coming, and if she planned to pass it off as mine, what else was she capable of? I needed answers, but I knew confronting her with accusations would only make her double down on the lies. So I played it cool, smiling weakly when her parents dropped by, acting clueless whenever Carol flaunted her long hours. Deep down, I was locking down every bit of suspicion, readying myself for the day I'd finally crack this wide open. Because if Carol thought she could keep me in the dark, she'd picked the wrong man to toy with. A few days later, Carol came home unusually cheerful, humming as she flipped through her patient files. The shift in her mood was jarring. Just the night before, she glared at me for forgetting to unload the dishwasher, snarling something about my incompetence. Now she was almost glowing, and I couldn't help but wonder if her sudden good humor meant she just had a rendezvous with whoever was sneaking into her life behind my back. I played along, asking if she wanted me to help sort her files. She gave me this odd smile, like she found me amusing in a pathetic sort of way, and said, "I've got it. Don't strain yourself, Mr. Badback." The jab stung, but I pretended it rolled right off me. If she thought I'd learned nothing from years of remodeling old houses, where every hidden pipe or cracked beam had to be inspected before the real work began, she was sorely mistaken. I was already knee-deep in my own investigative project, gathering every piece of evidence I could without tipping her off. One evening, I decided to follow her after she claimed she had emergency orthodontic work at 8 o'clock at night. Dentists don't typically handle crises that late, but Carol insisted it was normal. So, I hopped into my truck and trailed her from a distance. She drove to a swanky neighborhood about a half-hour away, far from her clinic, then parked in front of a modern glass house. My heart hammered in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm, creeping closer on foot once she went inside. A silhouette appeared in an upstairs window, and after a few minutes, the lights flicked on in the room, revealing Carol standing with a man I vaguely recognized. Then it hit me. He was her ex-colleague, Kyle. She'd mentioned him in passing years ago, always describing him as too ambitious for his own good. I never sensed anything personal between them, but clearly, she'd left out some details. My blood roared in my ears when I saw them share an intimate, lingering look. No, they weren't just reviewing patient charts. I nearly rushed up to the door, ready to call them both out. But the practical part of me, the one that used to check every measurement twice before pouring concrete, held me back. I needed ironclad proof, not an impulsive confrontation. So I waited in the shadows while hours crawled by. Eventually, Carol came out, that same smug satisfaction written all over her face. My pulse pounded with betrayal, but I swallowed it down, forcing myself to remain silent and unnoticed. Back home, I barely made it through the front door before she caught me off guard by announcing, "We need to talk." For a split second, I thought she might confess. My mind raced with how I'd react if she told me she was carrying Kyle's child. Instead, She laid down a bizarre new rule. I want you to move your fishing gear out of the garage. Make room for my new shelves. I'm sick of clutter. She stared at me expectantly, as though the subject of our marriage and the potential baby was an afterthought compared to her sudden need for extra space. I tried to gauge her reaction, see if guilt was gnawing at her. Nothing. No trace of remorse, no flicker of doubt. It was like she was daring me to challenge her. So, once again, I kept quiet, nodding as if I'd comply with her request. On the inside, though, I was bristling. The disrespect was staggering. Not only lying about late-night shifts, but now blatantly dismissing my hobbies, my passion, like they were trash to be tossed. As if that wasn't enough, Carol insisted we attend her parents' church the next morning. She put on a nauseatingly sweet act in front of them, smiling, holding my arm, even whispering, "We're both thrilled about the future." I forced a smile, too, but my stomach churned. Her mother gazed at Carol's flat stomach with what could only be described as starry-eyed excitement, dropping hints about how God works in mysterious ways. Meanwhile, her father, a stoic man I'd never seen crack a joke, was suddenly all handshakes and warm welcomes. I felt like I was standing center stage in the world's most twisted play. Later that afternoon, I pretended to go fishing but instead drove back to the glass house, snapping discreet photos of Carol's car parked in the driveway. I figured if she was brazen enough to meet Kyle again, I'd have even more evidence. My hands trembled, thinking about what I'd do with that proof, and how I'd finally reveal that her so-called miracle was nothing more than a cunning cover-up. I just didn't realize how big this was about to get, or how messy my revenge would become once I had every last piece in place. 1 week later, Carol strutted into the living room, dropping a pamphlet on my lap with a forced smile. It was for a prenatal class of all things. The print read, "Preparing for your bundle of joy." My stomach twisted. She'd never made a formal announcement to me. No heartfelt moment, no honest conversation. Just this brazen invitation to play along in her little charade. Her eyes pinned me with a challenge, daring me to question her. I flipped through the pages, swallowing a surge of anger. Still, I managed a neutral tone. "So, is this for your clinic? Or for us?" She gave a little laugh that wasn't the least bit humorous. "Stop asking silly questions. You'll come. We'll do the couple activities. End of discussion." She turned on her heel and disappeared into the bedroom, leaving me with a spinning head and clenched fists. If she was pregnant with Kyle's child, she was doing a damn good job parading me around as the proud father-to-be, especially to her parents, who were now pouncing at every chance to support our growing family. I knew they'd insist on baptisms and baby showers soon. The entire community was about to celebrate this miracle, and Carol was reveling in the attention like a prize-winning actress. In desperation, I reached out to an old fishing buddy, Dean. We'd known each other back when I was still hauling lumber and climbing scaffolds. He came by under the guise of discussing a fishing trip to a remote river in the mountains. Over stale coffee in my garage, my fishing gear now crammed into a corner thanks to Carol's shelf takeover, I told him everything. The late-night clinic hours, the crumpled dinner receipt, the men's cologne, and the suspicious miracle. His eyes widened with each new detail. Dean rubbed his temples and said, "Kevin, man, this is insane. Have you confronted her yet?" I shook my head. "Not directly. I can't just holler accusations. She'll twist my words and make me look like the bad guy. I need rock-solid proof." He handed me a small camera, the kind you can discreetly install. "Place this in your house. She might slip up when she's on the phone or if Kyle stops by." The suggestion made my skin crawl. It felt like something out of a spy movie, but I was past the point of moral hesitation. If she planned to pin someone else's baby on me, I had every right to gather evidence. I installed it behind a row of dusty trophies from my younger days, making sure the angle captured the living room and front door. A few nights later, Carol waltzed in at nearly 2 a.m., red lipstick smudged, hair tousled. She looked almost triumphant. I pretended to be asleep on the couch, but through half-lidded eyes, I watched her check her reflection in the hallway mirror. She wore a cunning grin before whispering under her breath, "Got you exactly where I want you." My pulse pounded as I wondered who that message was meant for. Kyle, me, or both of us. The next morning, with Carol already gone, I retrieved the camera's memory card. Sure enough, the audio picked up her late-night phone call with Kyle. The words were faint but clear enough. Yes, the church folks think it's his baby. Isn't that hilarious? She let out a cruel laugh, then added, he still believes I'm building shelves at the office. God, he's clueless. A pause. Then, if I can squeeze his signature on the final loan for the clinic, I'll be set. No matter how this pregnancy turns out. My vision blurred. She was using me not just for a cover story but also to secure funds for her business. Worse, she found it comical how oblivious I supposedly was. Rage coiled in my gut like a rattlesnake, ready to strike. But another wave of adrenaline swelled. A twisted excitement that maybe now I had enough to confront her and bring this whole sick game crashing down. Dean called again that afternoon, his voice tight. Kevin, I've got a lead. My coworker's brother used to date a receptionist at Carol's old practice. There might be more to uncover. The realization that Carol's deceit could run even deeper slammed me like a punch to the ribs. Suddenly, the half-truths and snide remarks felt like the tip of a much nastier iceberg. If she'd orchestrated this pregnancy lie for months, what else was buried in her past? Still, I forced myself to keep a lid on my emotions, no confrontation yet. Not until I had every shard of evidence lined up and a plan to expose her. Because, if Carol thought she was going to dupe her devout parents, humiliate me, and waltz off with her ex-colleague, she'd soon learn a bitter truth. Even a broken-down builder knows exactly where to strike to bring the whole foundation crumbling down. The very next day, Carol announced she was flying out to a dentistry conference in Denver. She made a big show of it in front of her parents, explaining how this trip was crucial for learning about cutting-edge equipment and networking. Her mother practically burst with pride. I just smiled and nodded, playing the faithful husband who believed every word. Inside, though, I felt my anger coil tighter. I'd already checked the conference's website. Dates didn't match up with Carol's claims at all. Determined to get more dirt, I called in a favor from Dean. He's well-connected and good at sniffing out truths people want buried. Within hours, he'd tracked down the real location of Carol's conference, a luxury resort just outside Denver known for its secluded cabins and spa packages. Not exactly a hub for high-tech dental seminars. Dean and I pooled some cash, and I booked a room at a modest motel down the road, deciding to drive there in secret. It was risky, but I couldn't sit at home waiting for her to slip up. If she and Kyle were using this as a getaway, I needed eyes on the ground. I drove through the night, fueled by coffee and a cold sense of purpose. Upon arrival, I quickly spotted Carol's sedan in the resort's parking lot. Sure enough, parked right beside it was Kyle's sleek silver coupe. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I wanted nothing more than to storm into the lobby, but I forced myself to be methodical. I watched from a distance as they exited together, laughing like a giddy couple on vacation. It was surreal, seeing my wife so comfortable, so brazenly affectionate with another man. They strolled across the resort grounds, arms intertwined, completely oblivious to me tailing them at a safe distance. The final straw came when I overheard them discussing her miracle baby, how it guaranteed a solid loan from the bank once I co-signed. Carol bragged that once the paperwork was done, she'd have every advantage, with or without Kevin. My blood went ice cold. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated plan to use me as a convenient financial donkey, then toss me aside once her clinic was up and running. She even joked about how gullible her parents were, buying into the whole sweet family fairy tale. I spent the next 2 days documenting everything. Snapshots of them holding hands at the spa entrance, a quick recording of their voices through a partially open window, details of their dinner reservations. I made sure to collect timestamps, cross-referencing them with the conference schedule Carol had allegedly gone to attend. By the time I hit the road back home, I had a mountain of evidence so damning it made my head spin. But I didn't feel triumph just yet. There was still a knot of raw pain in my chest, along with a fierce determination. They could laugh at me all they wanted, but they had no clue I was about to set fire to their entire house of lies. Especially the one Carol was busy selling to her devout parents. Returning home, I stashed my evidence in a lockbox hidden beneath a false plank in the kitchen floor. A small trick I learned back in my construction days. Carol arrived 3 days later, dropping her suitcase with exaggerated fatigue, as if she'd really been at seminars all day. She spouted off some baloney about learning new endodontic techniques, but all I could focus on was the glow in her cheeks and that tiny smirk she couldn't quite hide. She was acting so high and mighty, convinced she'd pulled off the perfect con. and maybe she had for now. But with every smug glance she threw my way, she only stoked the embers of my plan for payback. Because I wasn't just gathering proof anymore. I was preparing to blow the scheme wide open in front of the one place she'd never dare let it come crashing down. The church she and her parents revered like a second home. Carol's next move was to schedule a formal sit-down with her parents and me. She framed it as a joyful announcement. Something about revealing our timeline for the baby. I could see the victory dancing in her eyes. She wanted me to choke on my own silence while she sold her family more lies. Unsurprisingly, her parents couldn't wait to meet. So we found ourselves at their impeccably tidy house the following weekend. The air thick with manufactured excitement. The second I stepped through the door, Carol's mom latched onto my arm like I was some kind of miracle worker. "Kevin, we're just so thrilled," she gushed. "God is blessing you both. We were praying for this for so long." Carol's father stood behind her, nodding gravely, as though he'd orchestrated the entire event with a higher power. Carol, for her part, settled onto the couch and offered me a smug little grin, daring me to contradict her. I sat there, forcing a smile, as they bombarded us with questions about prenatal vitamins, nursery colors, and future baptisms. Carol started weaving the most elaborate fairy tale, complete with heartfelt details about how she felt it was the right time for us to expand our family. She patted my hand for dramatic effect, shooting me a sideways glance. It took every ounce of self-control not to snap. If her parents had any inkling about the real situation, that their daughter was carrying another man's child while preparing to use me for financial gain, they would have been devastated. But that's when a little bombshell dropped. Her mom proudly announced that the church was planning a special prayer circle, inviting friends and relatives to share in this blessing. She even suggested a brief testimony from us in front of the congregation. Carol paled for half a second. "Bling, can you'd miss it?" But then recovered quickly, waxing poetic about how grateful she was for everyone's support. I felt her stiffen beside me, though, like she recognized the risk of being put on display. If we were front and center at that service, any slip-up could blow her cover. On the drive home, she barely said a word to me. When we got inside, she threw her purse onto the table, practically snarling, "Don't get any ideas about embarrassing me in front of my parents' church, Kevin." The venom in her voice reminded me how she used to talk to incompetent interns at her old dental practice. She shoved a pamphlet into my hands, this time for a financial planning seminar. "We need you to finalize paperwork for the clinic's loan. My name alone might not cut it." Her eyes were cold, unyielding. I realized then she was doubling down, determined to secure that money before anything else came to light. She needed me to play the dutiful husband, sign the dotted line, and then, if her scheme played out, she could pass off the baby as mine for as long as she needed to. My stomach roiled at the thought. That night, I made contact with a friend of a friend who worked at a small DNA testing lab. I wanted to confirm there was a discreet way to test for paternity, ideally before the birth, since Carol was already spinning this miracle baby narrative. Turns out, modern tests can compare fetal DNA in the mother's blood to a potential father. It's risky, but it exists. I doubted she'd ever agree to that willingly, so I asked about the possibility of after the baby was born. Either way, I needed an official result. A smoking gun. Meanwhile, Dean dug up more intel on Kyle. He was heavily invested in several cosmetic dentistry ventures. Some had flopped. It looked like he, too, needed quick cash. This explained why Carol's planned clinic was so important. He was positioning himself as a silent partner. My mind reeled. Here I was, an ex-construction worker with a busted back, being played by two cunning opportunists. But the seeds of my revenge were already sprouting. I bided my time, continuing to record every suspicious phone call, every whispered conversation. One evening, I caught Carol in the living room, quietly updating Kyle about the church's prayer circle. She sounded anxious, telling him how her mother insisted on a bigger celebration, like it's some biblical prophecy. Kyle's laughter was cruel. He seemed to relish the irony of conning a congregation. They made jokes about how I'd be put in my place soon enough. That was when I decided to strike sooner rather than later. The more Carol built this up as a grand religious event, the bigger the fallout would be when I exposed her. I prayed, somewhat bitterly, that fate would give me the perfect moment to reveal my evidence. And as if on cue, Carol's mother invited me to attend a private midweek service, where close family friends would all gather for a small blessing ceremony, offering support for Carol's pregnancy. I agreed without hesitation, telling Carol it was the perfect opportunity to demonstrate my commitment. She shot me a wary look, unsure if I was truly going along or hiding something, but her ambition outweighed her suspicion. She needed those optics for her clinic loan, so she couldn't risk refusing the church's invitation. Little did she know, I was finalizing every last detail to make sure when the curtain fell on her performance, every single witness would be left wide-eyed in shock, and she'd have nowhere to run. The midweek service arrived, and the church was packed with the usual familiar faces. Neighbors, distant relatives, and a handful of folks who'd known Carol since she was a toddler running around these pews. Normally, a gathering like this would be subdued. A few prayers, maybe a hymn, but tonight felt like a show with Carol at the center of it all. She dressed in a modest blouse, draping a pastel shawl over her shoulders like a halo. Her parents beamed at her side, whispering about divine blessings and answered prayers. I hung back, head lowered, hands clasped. People assumed I was being reverent, but honestly, I was just trying to keep my pulse from exploding. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A final text from Dean, confirming that everything was in place if I wanted to pull the trigger right here, right now. I was torn. Part of me wanted to blow this entire charade to Kingdom come in front of the entire congregation. But I wasn't sure if the timing was right. The tension felt suffocating. Carol's father had already hinted he expected me to stand up and say a few words about our future child. My stomach churned at the thought. The service began with a gentle hymn, led by Carol's mother. Her voice wavered with emotion, and people closed their eyes, swaying with the music. Then the pastor asked Carol and me to come forward for a special blessing. The hush that fell over the room was thick enough to slice. Carol slipped her arm through mine, gripping me tightly. I could feel her nails digging into my arm, a silent warning not to ruin her pristine image. The pastor spoke softly about the miracle of new life, how God's timing is perfect. A few folks murmured amen, and Carol's mother wiped tears from her eyes. I couldn't help but glance at Carol's stomach. If she truly was pregnant, that child sure wasn't mine. And yet, all these people were gathering, praising, celebrating, completely unaware of the betrayal under their noses. The pastor invited Carol to share her testimony. She launched into a tearful story about how she'd prayed for a sign, and how this baby was an unexpected gift that brought us closer. I nearly bit my tongue off to keep quiet, but as she kept spinning that sugary lie, I saw the truth in her eyes. She was reveling in the spotlight, no remorse whatsoever. She ended with a shameless plug for her new clinic, encouraging everyone to pray for its success, so she could continue serving the community. Translation: funnel more money her way. Applause broke out. I caught sight of Carol's father nodding proudly, and several elderly church members wiping tears. Then, the pastor turned to me, his voice resonating through the microphone. "Kevin, would you like to say a few words of gratitude for this blessing?" I stepped forward, mind racing. Carol's grip on my arm tightened again. A half-dozen emotions clashed inside me. Anger, betrayal, pity for these well-meaning people. My throat felt like sandpaper. Every pair of eyes in the sanctuary was fixed on me, waiting for the father-to-be to proclaim his joy. But I couldn't do it. Not yet. I glanced at Carol, whose sweet smile faltered just a little as she read my hesitation. She knew I was on the verge of something big. I finally choked out a simple, "Thank you all for your prayers," and left it at that. A wave of relief, or maybe frustration, flashed over Carol's face. She'd expected me to sing her praises in some glowing speech. Instead, I'd barely said a thing. When the service concluded, people flocked to us, offering congratulations. Carol's mother patted my shoulder, telling me how proud she was that I was stepping up. A wave of guilt swept through me. I couldn't stand the idea of these decent folks being duped by her, but I knew if I exposed her too soon, it would be my word against hers. Even with everything I'd recorded, Carol was slick. She'd cry, accuse me of lies or paranoia, and twist the narrative to make me look unhinged. Fortunately, the real evidence was nearly ready. Through a contact at the lab, I'd secured a discreet, postnatal paternity test kit that could be processed within days of the baby's birth. Once I had that on paper, official, undeniable proof, no sob story of hers would bury the truth. and I had a plan to make sure that proof arrived in the most dramatic fashion possible. As we left the church, Carol dropped the facade. Under the dim glow of the parking lot lights, she rounded on me, hissing through clenched teeth. "Watch yourself, Kevin. Don't even think about ruining this for me." Her tone was so venomous I almost recoiled, but I held her stare and gave a calm nod, letting a slight, mocking grin curl at my lips. "Wouldn't dream of it," I murmured, though the fire in my gut said otherwise, because while she tightened her grip on the illusion of a perfect family, I was busy setting the stage for the grandest reveal of her life. And, judging by the glint of uncertainty in her eyes, she sensed it too. The game was still on, and we were inching dangerously close to the final showdown. The baby arrived on a Tuesday morning. Carol never bothered to call me until after the birth was done. Left me a terse voicemail saying, "It's a girl. You can come if you want." Every word dripped with indifference, as if I were the last person whose presence mattered in this entire charade. When I got to the hospital, I found her perched on the bed, beaming at her parents as they gushed about their new granddaughter. She barely glanced in my direction, and I pretended not to notice the tension beneath her forced smile. Her father placed a hand on my shoulder. "Congratulations, Kevin," he said softly, and I wanted to tell him not to waste his kindness on someone who'd been used like a pawn. But I swallowed my anger, returning a hollow smile. Carol looked worn out, but there was a triumphant gleam in her eyes, like the final piece of her plan had fallen into place. She didn't need me for anything except the occasional photo op and, of course, the loan paperwork she'd been hounding me about. By the next evening, she was discharged and back home with the baby, whom she named Hazel after her grandmother. The name would have been a lovely gesture under any normal circumstances, but this was far from normal. The moment we crossed our threshold, Carol thrust Hazel into my arms, an expression of mock concern on her face. "Here's your little angel," she said, but the underlying tone said, "Let's see you call me a liar now." I managed a gentle hold on the baby. She was tiny, innocent, and yet a symbol of the ultimate betrayal. Without meeting Carol's eyes, I murmured, "We should get some rest." She rolled her eyes, as if the entire fatherhood gig was just an inconvenience to her. I kept my mouth shut, because I knew the real storm was about to hit. The DNA test kit arrived the next day, courtesy of the discreet lab connection. Carol paid no attention when I quietly took Hazel's swab sample, claiming I was just checking her mouth for some routine newborn precaution. Given Carol's own dental background, that lie didn't raise suspicion. 2 days later, I sent the sample out, and then I waited, each hour feeling like a lifetime. Finally, the envelope arrived. Carol was at the clinic, so I opened the results alone in the kitchen. My hands shook as I read the words in bold. Probability of paternity, 0%. I braced for it, but seeing it on paper still knocked the air from my lungs. 8 months of Carol refusing me any kind of closeness. Then suddenly accidentally pregnant? It all lined up. Hazel wasn't mine, just like I knew in my gut. But I didn't break down. Instead, I felt this electric surge of grim determination course through me. I scanned the document again, then grabbed a folder where I'd stashed all my evidence. Photos of her rendezvous with Kyle, audio snippets of them mocking me, and the timeline of her work trips. I threw the test results on top. It was time for the final act. Sunday morning, Carol insisted on taking Hazel to her parents' church for the baby's first blessing, a huge event in their circle. I offered to drive separately, making some excuse about picking up extra diapers on the way. Carol shrugged, probably relieved to not have me crowding her spotlight. She went ahead with Hazel, expecting me to show up later like a dutiful fool. The entire congregation was gathered when I arrived, including Carol's parents, who were practically floating with pride. I kept my jacket zipped tight, feeling the envelope in the inner pocket. My chest pounded as I walked down the aisle to where Carol stood, receiving cooing compliments from neighbors and friends. The pastor welcomed me warmly, arms outstretched as if I were part of some joyous family tableau. I smiled back, heart hammering in my ears. Then came the moment. The pastor gestured for me to approach the podium and share my gratitude for our wonderful blessing. This time, I didn't freeze. I pulled out the envelope, stepping up to the microphone. My voice cracked just slightly as I began. "First, I want to thank you all for praying for my family, And I know many of you consider this baby a miracle. I paused, meeting Carol's shocked gaze. But there's something you need to know. Carol's face drained of color. Her father's brows knit in confusion. The crowd shifted restlessly. I pulled the DNA results from the envelope and carefully cleared my throat. According to this official paternity test, Hazel isn't mine. A ripple of stunned gasps swept through the church. Carol's mother actually dropped her hymn book. The pastor looked stricken. Carol sputtered, stepping forward. "Kevin, what are you?" But I held up a hand. "I've got proof of who the real father is, and it's not me." I glanced at Carol's father, whose face had gone a dangerous shade of red. For months, I kept quiet, even when Carol tried to pin this child on me. Well, I can't keep quiet anymore. I placed the envelope on the podium, every damning bit of evidence ready for anyone who cared to see it. Photos, statements, timelines, and the unequivocal test results. Chaos erupted. The hush of worship gave way to outraged murmurs and shocked questions. Carol's parents stared at her, betrayal and heartbreak etched on their faces. Carol stood frozen, her usual cutting sarcasm replaced with open-mouthed horror. Hazel let out a tiny cry from the commotion, but Carol hardly seemed to notice her own child. I forced myself to look at the pastor, who looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. "I'm sorry to drop this bombshell on everyone," I said quietly, "but I refuse to be paraded around like a fool any longer." With that, I turned on my heel and walked straight out of the church. Outside, the morning sun felt searingly bright, but I breathed in the fresh air with a sense of triumph. A minute later, I heard shouts from inside. Carol's father roared her name, and someone else cried, "Oh my Lord!" I pictured Carol scrambling to spin this, but there was no coming back from an exposed lie this colossal. Certainly not in front of her devout family and half the community. It was over. In the aftermath, Carol tried calling me dozens of times, but I let every ring go unanswered. She even left a voicemail, screaming that I'd ruined her life and threatening legal action if I dared back out of signing her clinic loan. I just laughed bitterly to myself. She'd never get my signature on anything now. She lost the clinic funding, her parents' respect, and the credibility she'd built around her so-called miracle. As for me, I filed for divorce immediately. Friends offered to let me crash at their place while I packed up my gear, so I didn't waste a second. I'd spent too long living under the same roof as someone who saw me as nothing but a stepping stone. Now, I'm finalizing the last details of our legal separation and plan to move a few towns over, where the trout streams run colder and the memories are fewer. My advice? Never underestimate how far someone might go to take advantage of your trust. And if you find yourself in my situation, collect your proof, wait for the perfect moment, then take your shot. Because sometimes the sweetest victory comes from exposing a lie in front of the very people who believed it was holy truth. Good riddance, Carol. I'm walking away with my head held high, and that's more than she can ever claim.
He wants to live with his real dad now. That's what she said. Not we've been thinking. Not maybe we should talk. Not even a softening he mentioned. No, flat. Cold. Like she was reading off a weather report. And the worst part? She didn't even look up when she said it. Karen just kept folding laundry, like she was checking off a chore. Like severing the last 12 years of my life came between sort socks and take the trash out. I stood there in my dusty coaching sneakers, still smelling like sweat and dust from third base. Adam's game had run late. I stayed after, helping a few of the kids with their swings. One of them had even said, "I wish my dad was like you." I'd smiled, said something light. Now I just felt stupid. "He's old enough to choose," she added, when I didn't respond right away. Old enough? He was 13. Old enough to know what TikTok was, maybe. Not old enough to understand what it means when a man wakes up at 5:30 a.m. every Saturday to get to the field early and rake the infield so your shoes don't get muddy. Not old enough to know what it costs to say yes to braces when the insurance barely covers your dental. Not old enough to know what kind of knot tightens in your chest the first time he calls you dad without being asked to. But sure, old enough to choose. I nodded slowly. Not because I agreed. Because I didn't trust myself to speak. The living room felt like a museum. Every object had a memory nail to it, and now each one felt like a joke. The leather couch with the torn seam Adam and I patched with duct tape after the dog chewed it. The frame with that picture of us at Yellowstone, Adam had his head on my shoulder and a leaf stuck in his hair. He didn't notice. I didn't tell him. I just liked the moment. I walked past her without another word. The silence between us had teeth by then. She didn't follow. Upstairs, I sat at the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. They looked unfamiliar, like they belonged to someone else, someone who mattered. Then I packed. One duffel for clothes. One lockbox with papers. I moved through the house quietly, but deliberately. I unplugged my name from our life like it was a bad extension cord. Mortgage paperwork, joint bank accounts, the insurance that still had me listed as head of household. Click. Unplug. Gone. The title to the house? I signed it fully into her name. I didn't even flinch. Let her have the house. Let her mop its floors and walk its halls and stare at the photos I left behind, wondering when exactly the man she erased stopped being soft. The last thing I did before leaving? I sat at the kitchen table and wrote a single sticky note. Everything he needs is already in him. Just hope someone reminds him. I left it on the fridge. By sunrise, I was gone. No door slam. No final stare. I moved into a small cabin near a lake 2 towns over. No neighbors. Just loons, mist, and the sound of water that didn't ask anything of me. And still, not once did she call. Not a single message. No check-in. No pause. Not that I expected it. Karen wasn't cruel. She was worse. She was confident. Confident that she'd won something. Confident that I'd crawl back when things got quiet. Confident that fatherhood was a role you could reassign like a school volunteer list. Let her think that. Let them both think that. Because something had already shifted inside me, something slow and precise and silent. Something they wouldn't notice until it was far too late. The silence was surgical. There was no fight, no shouting match, no last-minute plea. That's not how you operate when you've already died in the room and no one noticed. You don't perform grief. You just quietly drag the coffin behind you while everyone else sips wine and updates their Instagram. I didn't slam a door. I didn't even close it hard. The bags were packed methodically, clothes in one, documents in the other. The clothes didn't take long. Most of my favorites had quietly disappeared over the years anyway. Funny how that happens in marriages. A hoodie goes missing, a watch gets lost, your old flannel shirt somehow ended up in the donation box. The other bag? That took precision. Deed documents, bank login backups, copies of Adam's birth certificate and school records. Because yes, I'd been the one organizing all that for the past decade. Karen didn't even know the password to our online banking. Probably still doesn't. I transferred the house title fully into her name. Not as a favor, as a statement. I wasn't going to be the ghost that haunted the kitchen floor tiles. Let her explain the silence in the attic to her friends when they asked where I went. Then came the accounts. I drained the joint one. Not to spite her. I simply opened a solo account, took what was mine, and left the rest. She'd figure out soon enough that bills don't pay themselves when the not-real dad disappears with the real sense of responsibility. My name was surgically removed from every legal connection to that house. No more emergency contact on Adam's school file. No more insurance coverage on her car. I was done underwriting her fantasy of a self-made, independent woman who still needed my social security number to refinance the damn roof. By midnight, I was driving. 2 towns over. Quiet lake. 1 road in, 1 road out. Rented a cabin I used to fish near, back when weekends meant something. It smelled like cedar, mold, and freedom. Inside, I unpacked slowly. The old habit of order never left me. Shirts here. Files there. Coffee filters in the drawer by the kettle. The bed was firm. The air was cold, and the quiet wasn't just peace, it was armor. On the 3rd morning, I lit a fire and opened my laptop. I logged into Adam's school portal. Grades had dropped slightly. Missed 2 assignments in English. I watched the screen for a while, then closed it. Not my problem anymore, right? I poured coffee, stepped outside, and stared at the lake. Water doesn't argue. It doesn't ask questions. It just reflects what you bring to it. I like that. That's when the first email arrived. From Karen. Subject line. No subject. Inside? Blank. Not even a signature. That was her tell. She thought I'd chase the breadcrumb. Respond. Ask what was wrong. Open the window. I didn't. I hit archive, sipped my coffee, and picked up a chisel. There was a rotted bench out back. I had decided to rebuild it, piece by piece. just like I was about to rebuild myself without them. Karen always did love the optics. 3 weeks after I left, she hosted a little wine and laughs night with her independent friends, the ones who all wore the same shade of empowerment lipstick and clapped when someone filed for divorce like it was a graduation. I heard about it because my name still lingered on a few shared calendar apps and promotional junk mail. The invite was titled Fresh Starts and Full Glasses. Subtle. From what I gathered later, it was a whole performance. Cheeseboards, Pinterest-level lighting, empty talk filled with phrases like stepping into my power, and I forgot how free I could feel. Someone even brought monogrammed napkins that said, no regrets, just red wine. I'm guessing I was the regret in question. But what really nailed it was what she said while topping off a friend's glass of rose. Adam's real dad is flying in next month. It'll be good for him. A boy needs to know where he comes from. I nearly choked when I heard that line. Not because it was cruel, Karen's always been sharper than she acts, but because of how confidently she delivered it. As if the guy who bailed when Adam was still in pull-ups had suddenly grown a spine, or a calendar. Adam, for his part, looked thrilled. Every time I checked the school portal, yeah, I still had access. She hadn't noticed. His attendance was solid again, grades still slipping slightly, but socially, he was buzzing. Logged more messages on his school chat in a week than he had all year. Probably texting the man who disappeared for a decade like they were long-lost brothers reunited by fate and an iPhone. Then came the photo. Karen posted it to Facebook, new profile picture. The three of them, Karen, Adam, and the dog I'd rescued from a kill shelter in Mississippi. Standing on the porch. Forced smiles. Matching flannel shirts, like a Land's End catalog threw up. I was in the original photo. You could tell by the awkward gap on the left where the dog's leash drooped weirdly into nothingness. She cropped me out with surgical precision, left just enough shoulder to hint at the edit, like a digital lobotomy. But she left in the welcome mat I had made. Literally hand-burned it with a pyrography kit, the Martins EST 2010. What can I say? Karen's never been good at details. The comments came in fast. Beautiful family, 2 arts. So happy for you. Single mama winning. But a few of the older ones, the ones who remembered the early years, the T-ball fundraisers, the Halloween parties where I carved 12 pumpkins in the garage so the kids wouldn't feel left out, left shorter, more curious comments. Where's Daniel? Miss seeing you guys together. Hope Adam's doing okay. Karen didn't respond. Just liked the praise. Ignored the rest. That's her way, control the narrative, filter the discomfort. But there was a subtle shift. I saw it. The applause wasn't as loud. The likes were there, but fewer from the ones who mattered. Her sister didn't share it. Her cousin, an ER nurse I'd once stayed up with overnight to help fix her broken sink, left a single word. Even pixels can smell the cracks. Back at my cabin, I printed the photo. Not for nostalgia. I stuck it on the fridge next to a grocery list and scrawled one word in red ink across the top. Performance. Because that's all it was. A set. A prop. An illusion. And illusions always break, especially when the audience starts to squirm in their seats. The first cancellation came with a text. Flight issues. Tell Adam I'll reschedule. Can't wait to see him. T. No explanation. No apology. Just a vague, disposable sentence from a man who'd spent more time crafting excuses than building a family. Karen spun it with her usual spin. Told Adam his real dad had an emergency at work, something about a client meeting in Denver. Adam nodded but didn't ask questions. Kids always know when they're being lied to, they just choose when it hurts less to pretend. The second time, there was no text at all. Just silence. Adam sat by the front window all Sunday afternoon, PlayStation controller untouched, wearing that stupid Chicago Bulls hoodie Karen bought him for the trip. The porch light came on before he finally asked, flatly, "Is he still coming?" Karen blinked. "He's just delayed. Something probably came up. You know how work is." Yeah, I knew. I'd worked 60-hour weeks and still managed to make every single one of Adam's Little League games, sometimes showing up straight from job sites, covered in concrete dust, just to shout his name from the bleachers. But sure, something came up. That week, I noticed the school portal listed a missed assignment in science and a behavioral warning for verbal outbursts during class discussion. Adam, the same kid who once spent 3 hours building a volcano project with baking soda and ketchup packets, now couldn't sit through a worksheet. Meanwhile, Karen was starting to sweat, and not in the gym influencer, inspirational post kind of way. The cracks were quiet, but visible if you knew where to look. First, it was the Amazon packages slowing down. Then the credit card statement. Yes, I still had access to the old dashboard. She forgot to lock me out, started showing payment minimums instead of balances cleared. And then the car. The Honda Civic, the one she used for school pickups, started coughing black smoke like it had been chain smoking behind her back. One day it just stopped in the middle of the Target parking lot. AAA towed it. Karen called 3 different people before someone finally gave her a ride. Guess who she didn't call? The next day, she skipped work. Had to. No car. Her job at the dental office wasn't sympathetic either. I know the office manager. She used to bring her kid to Adam's practices. Told me quietly that Karen had been distracted, showing up late, taking calls in the break room. One thing about modern life, it's held together by invisible duct tape, and you don't realize who was doing the taping until the pieces start falling off. I was the duct tape. Always had been. Karen tried to apply for a payment extension on Adam's school tuition. Private school, of course. Her choice. Back when we were still pretending to be a power couple. She called the office, left a message, followed up with an email. The automated reply came back within 5 minutes. Dear Mrs. Martin, as your account no longer lists Mr. Daniel Martin as financially responsible, please arrange payment by the 12th to avoid enrollment disruption. A real kick in the teeth. Especially with her wine club friends still commenting heart emojis under her filtered Instagram selfies. Adam, meanwhile, started keeping to himself. Karen tried bribing him with fast food, screen time, even offered to let him play that M-rated game I'd always said no to. Didn't work. He'd come home, throw his backpack on the floor, grunt through dinner, then shut his bedroom door like it was a vault. No more goofy jokes. No more updates about his school crush. Just silence and a glowing phone screen, and the slow grind of disillusionment. One night, I saw a new post on Karen's Facebook. A blurry photo of Adam at the kitchen table, head down in his arms. Caption, growing pains. He's just figuring things out. No, he wasn't. He was figuring her out. And what he was finding wasn't pretty. Adam failed 2 quizzes in a row. That's the first thing I noticed when I logged into the portal again, sometime after midnight. Math and science, his strongest subjects. Ones I used to help him with, back when evenings meant whiteboards, jokes about math being just angry reading, and that stupid pencil he chewed the eraser off of until it looked like a melted crayon. Now, a red column of D's and a note from Miss Ferris. Adam seems distracted lately. Please follow up at home. Home. What a cruel word when it no longer means you. I sat at my desk in the cabin, staring at the screen while the fire behind me cracked softly. My hand hovered over the keyboard. It would have taken me 5 seconds to draft an email. 2 lines. Simple. Hi, Miss Ferris. Adam's going through some changes at home. I'm monitoring from afar. But I didn't. I just closed the tab and leaned back in my chair. Let it burn. The next morning, I got a call from Tom at the hardware store. We'd coached together a few seasons back, and he still made it a point to accidentally mention local gossip when I came by for supplies. That day he let something slip. You hear Karen's working nights now? Saw her behind the register at the Speedway off Route 11. Weird seeing her in a uniform that doesn't have her name stitched in cursive. I didn't respond. Just nodded, slid a packet of wood screws across the counter, and said, need a belt sander too. Back home, I added another coat of polish to the bench I'd been rebuilding. The same one Adam and I used to sit on while fishing during summers when the only thing that mattered was who got the biggest catch. It was rotted through when I first got to the cabin, one of those forgotten things the world leaves behind when it thinks no one's looking. Fitting. Sanding it down had become ritual. Quiet, repetitive, exact. Like therapy for someone who doesn't want to talk. Each stroke of the grain took a little more noise out of my head. Karen, I imagined, was neck-deep in noise now. Second job, dead car, unpaid bills, a kid who looked at her like a stranger. The Pinterest fantasy was collapsing. There's a special kind of gravity that kicks in when the man holding up the roof walks out the front door. Suddenly, everything creaks louder. I could have reached out, called, offered a lifeline, even anonymously paid the school fee. But I didn't. Let her feel the weight of every task I used to handle without applause. Let her learn that the quiet man she thought was easy to replace had been the scaffolding holding the whole structure together. And now, let her rebuild it herself. Without blueprints. Without nails. As for Adam, I watched. I watched his attendance wobble. Watched his name drop lower in class rank. Watched his essays get shorter, the comments from teachers colder. But I didn't interfere. Because sometimes love means letting the fall happen. Letting them hit the ground so they finally look up and ask, where was the net? And realize the man they erased was the net all along. It happened on a Friday. Karen didn't even post about it, too afraid, maybe, that the fanfare would fizzle. But word got around. My old neighbor texted me a photo of a silver Dodge Challenger parked in front of the house. Personalized plates. Tinted windows. A man steps out, mid-40s, overtanned, black shades, hair trying very hard not to be thinning. So that's the real dad, the text said, followed by a single eye-roll emoji. Adam was waiting on the porch when he pulled up. Backpack on, shoes tied tight like he was heading to a sleepover at the edge of the galaxy. His face had that strange mix of awe and doubt that kids carry when they meet someone who's only existed in stories. It wasn't joy, it was hope shaped like curiosity. The kind that trembles. The man stepped up and hugged him, said something I couldn't hear, probably, hey, buddy, or some generic Hallmark line. Then they got in the car and drove off. Just like that. 12 years of bedtime routines and ball games replaced by a weekend joyride. I didn't log into anything that night. I just poured a drink and sat out back, watching the lake like it might cough up some truth. By Sunday evening, Adam was back. No photos, no posts, no proud declarations. Karen uploaded a single shot to her Instagram story, 2 fast food cups and a takeout bag with the caption, Boys Weekend Hamburger Collision. It stayed up for the full 24 hours. Then gone. Like everything else. Week 2, same setup. Challenger pulls up. Adam runs out with a duffel. This time he looks less like he's walking into a fantasy and more like he's testing a theory. They return Sunday afternoon. No hugs. No lingering conversations at the curb. Just a quiet handoff, like returning a library book. Week 3? Nothing. No car. No call. Not even a text. Adam waited on the porch until the sun dipped behind the trees. Then he went inside without saying a word. Karen didn't follow. No yelling, no sugar-coated excuse. Just the thud of the front door shutting and the light flickering off in the hallway a few minutes later. The next morning, I checked the school portal. Adam had missed first period. The morning after that? Same thing. Then, midweek, a new alert popped up in the notes. Student appears withdrawn. Please check in at home. At home. What a sick joke. From what I could piece together through the cracks, the great reunion had been exactly what I expected. A series of gas station meals, controller-staring weekends, and some half-baked promises about next time. The man had brought video games and excuses, not advice, not guidance. And certainly not the spine it takes to show up every day when you're not in the mood and the kid's being a jerk and the water heater just exploded. Work's been crazy, was all Karen got when she texted him after he ghosted weekend 3. A sentence with all the weight of dryer lint. Adam didn't say much at school, either. His friend Mason's dad told me, quietly, that Adam had been getting into it with a few classmates. Sarcasm turned bitter. He'd lashed out at a substitute teacher over a group project and got sent to the counselor. He just sat there, Mason's dad said, like he wanted to cry but couldn't decide if it was worth the energy. That Sunday, I walked down to the edge of the lake just before dark. Cold wind. Still water. Silence like church before the choir starts. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, another buzz. This time, it said Karen. And right below it, Adam. I didn't touch the phone. Just stood there, watching the reflection of my cabin lights ripple on the surface, waiting to see if either of them would finally realize what it costs when the man you erase turns out to be the only one who was ever really there. The meltdown didn't happen all at once. It came in fractures. Small, sharp ones. Like when porcelain starts to crack, you don't notice until the coffee leaks through the bottom. A neighbor down the street, Mrs. Levy, left me a voicemail. She always liked to gossip, but this one had no glee in her voice. Just tension. I don't mean to get involved, Daniel, but there was shouting last night. Loud. From your old place. Something about baseball? And Adam said your name. I don't know if you're supposed to know that, but I deleted the message after listening once. I didn't need it. I could already picture it. Karen, tired from working both jobs, walking into a messy kitchen, school mail on the counter, dishes still in the sink from the night before. She probably saw the flyer for the baseball tryouts lying under a water ring and snapped. Why didn't you tell me this was today? Adam's voice, already dulled by disappointment. I did. Twice. I work. I can't just drop everything for a game. Tryout. What? It's not a game. It's a tryout. You said you'd. I never said I'd. Don't talk to me like I'm stupid, Adam. And then, the silence breaks. Louder than anything she expected. At least Daniel listened. That's the part Mrs. Levy heard. That's the part the walls couldn't contain. Karen probably froze. Not from the insult, but from the comparison. That name? The one she thought she could edit out of her life like an old contact in her phone? It was still breathing in that house. Still present. In Adam's voice. In the absences that weighed heavier than anything she could explain. That night, Adam didn't eat dinner. Didn't leave his room. Karen poured herself 2 glasses of red and stared at the TV without seeing anything. The next morning, her car was gone. Not stolen. Repossessed. She missed 3 payments while juggling minimum shifts at the gas station and pretending to be the version of herself she used to Instagram. That Civic? It was already on its last breath. Now it was in a tow lot behind a strip mall. Adam missed his baseball tryouts. Karen tried to call an Uber, but her card got declined. By afternoon, she was in the school office, arguing about paperwork, trying to excuse the absence, fumbling for lies. Adam sat outside on a bench, staring at his cleats like they were relics from another life. That evening, my phone buzzed. Karen. Once. Then again. Then again. I let it ring. Then Adam. I turned the phone over, screen down on the table. Let the cabin hum its quiet rhythm around me. The kettle whistled. The wood creaked. The lake outside didn't care who missed what. They were reaching now, not from love, but from loss. Not because they wanted me back. Because the wait was finally real. They thought I'd left to punish them. They still didn't understand. I left to stop saving them. And now? They were finally drowning on their own. The lake doesn't care about phone calls. It doesn't blink when someone cries. Doesn't flinch when your name burns through a screen. It just stays still, watching, reflecting, erasing. That's why I come here every morning. Before the fog lifts, before the sun decides what kind of day it wants to be. It's the only mirror I trust now. That morning, I had walked halfway around the bend, boots crunching over damp leaves, when I felt the buzz in my coat pocket. Once. Karen. Twice. Adam. A pause. Then again. This time, no name, just a number. Probably someone she roped in to try for her. Maybe her sister. Maybe a school secretary she convinced to dial on her behalf. I kept walking. The buzzing didn't stop. 5 more times before I reached the dock. Then silence. Then voicemail chimes. 5, 6, 7. I sat down on the edge of the dock, pulled out the phone, and finally looked. Karen's last message. You don't have to talk to me. Just talk to him. Adams reads simply. I messed up. I didn't play the voicemails. Not because I was angry. Because I already knew what they'd say. Karen's voice cracking, trying to sound composed. He misses you, Daniel. I know you're hurt, but this isn't about us anymore. That fake balance between apology and justification. A woman who lit the match now blaming the fire for burning the house down. And Adam, probably breathing hard, unsure if he was crying or just scared. 13 years old and suddenly aware that biology doesn't parent you. That being born to someone doesn't mean they'll ever show up again. My fingers hovered over the play button. For a moment, I almost pressed it. Then I looked up. The lake was still, smooth as glass. I saw my reflection in it, small and sharp and clean. And I realized, if I pressed play, I'd step back into the role of fixer, of ghost dad turned superhero, back into shouldering the weight of everyone's choices just because I could. I put the phone down next to me, let the sun creep up over the tree line. A bird screamed overhead. A ripple hit the shore. And for the first time in years, I didn't flinch at the sound of my name. The phone buzzed again. I didn't answer. Didn't even pause. Somewhere behind me, 2 people were realizing what it means when the man who always shows up finally doesn't. It was just past midnight when I heard the knock. Not loud. Not panicked. Just steady, like someone who had walked a long way and wasn't sure what to expect when the door opened. I was still awake, sharpening a chisel under the warm yellow glow of the desk lamp. It was something I did when sleep didn't come, a rhythm of steel on stone that didn't ask anything of me. I opened the door. Adam stood there, soaked from the rain, hoodie clinging to him like a wet towel, sneakers caked in mud, eyes red, not from tears, but from trying not to cry. "Can I stay?" he asked. His voice cracked on the second word. I didn't speak. I didn't smile. I didn't lecture him. I just stepped aside and pointed to the guest room, the one with the twin bed, extra quilt, and the old lamp that flickered sometimes when the wind hit the wires just right. He walked in, didn't ask for food or dry clothes. Just vanished down the hallway like a ghost trying not to be seen. A minute later, I heard the soft squeak of the bed springs and the sound of him setting his bag on the floor. Then nothing. For a while. Until the walls breathed it in. The muffled sobs. First small, then raw. The kind that come from the chest, not from pain, but from breaking through a numbness you didn't know you'd built. I didn't go in. Not because I didn't care. Because I couldn't care for him the way he remembered. That boy on the field? The one I high-fived after strikeouts just as often as home runs? The one I stayed up with past midnight helping make dioramas with glued-on stars and glitter that never fully came off? That boy left when I did. What came to my door was someone older. Not in age, but in wounds. Adam had chosen silence when it counted. Had treated me like wallpaper until the foundation cracked. And now that his fantasy had evaporated, he wanted something solid again. I wasn't angry. I was hollow. I sat back down at the workbench and stared at the chisel. Its edge was clean, sharper than it had ever been. I could see my own reflection in it, blurred, but whole. In the guest room, his sobs had faded into those small, jagged breaths kids take when they've cried all they can and are too exhausted to think anymore. Still, I didn't enter. I let him have that room. And I kept mine. Because sometimes love isn't a hug at the door. Sometimes it's a line drawn in the dark, quiet, firm, unspoken. You left, and I didn't chase you. Now you're here. But it's not the same, and it never will be. She arrived just after noon. I heard the tires crunch over gravel before I saw her, Karen's old beige Subaru, dirt-streaked and rattling like it hadn't had an oil change in months. She parked half-crooked, engine still running like she wasn't sure if she'd stay or run again. The wind caught her door as she opened it, slamming it against her hip. She didn't react. I was sitting on the porch, mug of black coffee in hand, watching the lake breathe under the pale sky. Adam was still asleep. At least I assumed so. He hadn't emerged from the guest room all morning, and I hadn't gone to check. Karen stood at the edge of the porch like she was waiting for permission to come closer. She looked tired in a way makeup couldn't fix, cheeks sunken, lips dry, jacket zipped up wrong. Her hair was pulled back into a half bun, frayed strands sticking out like someone who'd gotten dressed in the dark while trying not to cry. "I made a mistake," she said softly. I took a sip of coffee. "I thought I was doing what was best," she added, louder this time. "I thought he needed to know where he came from." I didn't realize. Her voice cracked. She stepped up onto the porch, holding her hands together like she was trying to keep them from shaking. "He needs you, Daniel. He doesn't say it, but I see it. He's not okay." I didn't answer. She took a breath, swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. I should have God. I should have known what would happen. I thought he'd be enough. The real dad, the pictures, the idea of it all. But it wasn't real. You were." The words hung in the cold afternoon air like laundry left out too long. And still I didn't speak. She looked up at me, eyes brimming. "Please, just talk to him. He'll listen to you." He always did. I set the mug down slowly and stood. For a long second, I just stared at her. Not with hate, not with rage, but with the kind of hollow clarity you only get after surviving a storm you were never warned was coming. "You both made your choices," I said. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I stepped back inside the cabin. She stayed there, frozen. And then the door shut. Not hard. Not loud. Just final. No anger. No shouting. No lecture. Just the clean, simple sound of the past being sealed off for good. Behind me, the house was quiet. Adam stirred in the other room. Outside, Karen's sob built in her throat, but I didn't hear the rest. Because I didn't look back. Let them pay the price they wrote in ink the day they crossed out my name. And let them finally understand. Some doors don't reopen. Not even for forgiveness.
The dining room buzzed with laughter and conversation as glasses clinked together in toast after toast. My father, sitting proudly at the head of the table, raised his wine glass high. To family, he declared, his voice booming with the confidence only years of being the patriarch could bring. No matter what life throws at us, we stick together. Everyone echoed his words, lifting their glasses with wide smiles. I forced myself to smile too, though the knot in my stomach told me something was about to go horribly wrong. Next came my sister, Jenna, the unofficial comedian of the family. She stood with her glass, laughing as she regaled us with a funny memory of how Lucas had once declared himself king of the house when he was 5. Everyone laughed, Jeff included, his deep chuckle resonating down the table. Lucas squirmed in his seat, a shy smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Then my brother chimed in with a more serious toast, one about resilience and how we had all weathered hard times. His words were heartfelt, and there was a smattering of applause as he sat down. I noticed Lucas fidgeting beside me, his hands gripping his napkin tightly. He was unusually quiet, his wide brown eyes darting around the table like he was searching for something. I reached out to squeeze his hand, but he pulled away, standing abruptly. "Lucas, Honey," I said softly, trying to guide him back to his seat. But he ignored me. Everyone fell silent as Lucas picked up his glass of water. He was small for 12, but in that moment his presence commanded the room. "I want to say something," he began, his voice steady but trembling with something just beneath the surface, something heavy, about how important family is to me. My heart swelled, thinking he was going to say something sweet, something that would make everyone go, "Haw-whoa." But as he spoke, I realized there was a strange intensity in his tone. "I have been thinking about what it really means to be family," he continued, his words carefully measured, "and how sometimes family is about honesty and trust." A murmur of approval went around the table. Jeff smiled at him warmly, nodding as if to say, "That is my boy." Lucas hesitated for a moment, his knuckles white as he gripped his glass. "Mom told me not to say this," he said, his voice suddenly louder, clearer. "But I feel like this is the right moment." The room went dead silent. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt every muscle in my body tense. "She hinted," Lucas said, looking straight at Jeff now, "that my real dad might be sitting at this table." The sound of a fork clattering onto a plate shattered the silence. My father's hand froze mid-air, his wine glass trembling slightly. Jeff's face twisted from confusion to shock, then something far darker. Jenna's eyes widened as she mouthed, "What?" Lucas turned his gaze to me, his eyes now filled with anger and hurt. "What did you not just tell me?" he demanded. The room erupted. Chairs scraped against the floor, overlapping voices filled the air, and everyone was asking questions at once. Jeff's face burned with fury as he stood, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Claire, what the hell is going on?" he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. And there I sat, paralyzed, with nowhere to run and no way to stop what was coming next. The eruption of voices was instant and chaotic. My father, usually the calmest man in the room, slammed his hand on the table so hard the glasses rattled. "What nonsense is this?" he barked, his voice sharp with disbelief. Jenna leaned toward me, her face pale. "Claire, what is Lucas talking about?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Jeff didn't bother whispering. His entire body was tense as he jabbed a finger in my direction. "Answer him? What does he mean? His real dad is sitting here." Lucas, standing like a statue amidst the chaos, didn't flinch. His gaze bounced between Jeff and me, waiting, demanding an answer I wasn't prepared to give. "Lucas, sit down," I said, my voice cracking. I reached for his arm, but he pulled away sharply. "No." His voice was firm, stronger than I had ever heard it before. "You told me not to say anything, Mom, but I cannot keep this secret anymore." Jeff's face turned an alarming shade of red. "What secret? What secret?" he roared, slamming his hands on the table as he stood. The kids at the other end of the table started to cry, sensing the tension. My mother, ever the peacemaker, stood as well, her voice shaky but gentle. "Jeff, please sit down. Let us all take a moment to calm down." But Jeff wasn't calming down. He turned to the rest of the table, his voice trembling with fury. "Does anyone here know what the hell is going on? Claire, are you going to explain? Or do I have to drag it out of you?" I wanted to sink into the floor, to disappear entirely, but there was no escape. I could feel the walls closing in, the weight of their stares pressing down on me like a suffocating wave. "Jeff, it's not what you think," I stammered, desperate to regain control. "Then what is it?" "Claire," he snapped, his eyes narrowing, "because what I am hearing sounds like our son thinks I am not his father." Lucas's voice rose above the din, cutting through the tension with precision. "You are not," he said simply, his words like a hammer driving nails into the room's fragile silence. Jeff's mouth fell open, and for a moment he looked genuinely stunned. Then his expression twisted into something darker. "This is insane," he muttered, running his hands through his hair. "You told me," Lucas said, turning back to me, his voice quieter now, but no less firm. "You said I shouldn't ask questions because it would hurt people. But I deserve to know, Mom. I deserve to know the truth." My father stood, his face a mixture of confusion and anger. "Claire, is there some truth to this? What on earth is going on here?" My mother, who hadn't moved from her seat, looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. "Claire," she whispered, "say something, please." Jeff's gaze bore into me, his voice low and cold now. "Claire," he said, each word deliberate and sharp. "Tell me this is a misunderstanding. Tell me Lucas is wrong." But I couldn't. I couldn't find the words, couldn't figure out how to untangle the mess I had made. Every second of silence was another second of Jeff's patience unraveling. "Mum," Lucas said again, his voice trembling now. "Tell them." I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, Jeff's fist slammed onto the table, making everyone jump. "You told him," he yelled, his voice raw with betrayal. "You told our 12-year-old son something like this, but not me." "I didn't." I started, but he cut me off, his voice rising. "Who, Claire? Who is it? Who the hell are you hiding at this table?" His eyes scanned the faces of my brother, my cousin, even my father. The room was no longer silent. Voices overlapped in frantic whispers and accusations. My sister was trying to calm Jeff down. My father was demanding answers, and Lucas was shouting over everyone. And all I could do was sit there, the truth clawing at my throat, knowing that once it came out, nothing would ever be the same. Jeff's breathing was ragged, his hands trembling as they gripped the edge of the table. His voice broke through the cacophony, booming like a thunderclap. Who is it? Claire." He gestured wildly toward the table, his eyes flicking between my brother, my cousin, and even my father, the accusation unspoken but heavy in the air. "Jeff, stop," I managed to say, but my words were weak, drowned out by the chaos around me. Lucas stood firm, his small frame defiant against the towering fury of the room. "I have a right to know," he said, his voice steady despite the tears welling in his eyes. "I deserve to know who my dad really is." "Lucas, sit down," I snapped, panic finally breaking through. My voice cracked, but it was too late to reel him back in. "No," he shot back, his voice filled with a determination that took me aback. "You told me not to ask questions, but I cannot live like this anymore." "Mom," my father's deep, commanding voice rose above the commotion. "Enough," he barked, slamming his palm on the table. The room fell silent, save for the muffled sobs of one of the younger kids in the corner. His gaze burned into me, demanding answers. "Claire, what is going on? You owe us all an explanation." I felt trapped, the walls of the dining room closing in. My chest tightened, and I struggled to find my voice, but Jeff wasn't waiting. He stood abruptly, his chair toppling over behind him. "Claire, you look me in the eye and tell me what the hell this is about." His voice cracked, his anger laced with something far more devastating, betrayal. "Jeff, please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "Not here. Not like this." "Then when?" "Claire," he shouted, his fists clenched at his sides. "When were you planning to tell me that the son I have raised for 12 years might not be mine?" The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest as she turned to me horrified. "Claire," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is it true? Is there someone else?" I shook my head desperately, but the weight of the truth was too much to bear. "It's not like that," I said, my voice cracking. "It's complicated."
Yeah.
"Complicated." Jeff's laugh was bitter, hollow. "You do not get to call this complicated. You lied to me. You lied to him." He pointed at Lucas, who flinched but didn't back down. "Jeff," I said, my voice barely audible. "Please." "Bah. Then explain." He roared, his voice shaking the very walls. "Explain why my son, our son, Just said his real dad might be sitting at this table. I couldn't breathe. My head spun as the room blurred into a haze of shouting, accusations, and rising anger. Then, just as I thought the situation couldn't spiral any further, Lucas stepped forward, his eyes locked on one person. "Is it you?" he asked quietly, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. The room froze. Every head turned to follow Lucas's gaze, and all eyes landed on my cousin Mark. Mark's face drained of color, his glass of wine slipping from his hand and shattering on the floor. "What?" he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Lucas," I said, my voice trembling as I stepped toward him. "Stop this, please." But Lucas wasn't stopping. His gaze bore into Mark, unwavering. "Mom said it might be you," he said, his words like a dagger. Mark's chair screeched as he pushed it back, standing abruptly. "This is ridiculous," he said, his voice high and strained. "Claire, tell him he's wrong." But I couldn't. My silence spoke louder than any words could. Jeff turned to Mark, his eyes narrowing. "Is this true?" he demanded, his voice deadly calm now. "Did you?" Mark shook his head violently, his hands raised in denial. "No, of course not," he said, his voice cracking. "Claire, tell him. Tell him he's wrong." The room was a powder keg, seconds away from exploding, and I was standing in the middle of it, unable to stop what was coming next. The tension in the room was electric, every breath sharp and heavy. Mark's denial only fanned the flames, his wide eyes darting around the table as if searching for an escape route. Jeff's gaze was locked on him, unyielding, demanding answers. Lucas stood his ground, unshaken. "You're lying," he said, his voice a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around him. His words were like gasoline on an open fire. Mark's hands shut up defensively. "I am not lying," he shouted, his voice cracking under the pressure. "This is insane. Claire, say something." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My mind was racing, scrambling for a way to pull us out of this spiraling nightmare. My silence was a spotlight, and it was damning. Jeff's voice broke through. "Did you or didn't you?" He stepped toward Mark, his fists clenched, his entire body radiating fury. Mark took a step back, his chair clattering to the floor. "I didn't do anything," he stammered, his voice rising in pitch. "You're out of your mind if you think." "Enough." My father's voice boomed, silencing the room once again. He stood, his face ashen but commanding. "Claire, you owe everyone here an explanation. Now." The weight of his words crushed me. There was no way out. The truth was a storm, and I had no shelter. "Lucas said," my voice trembling as I turned to him. "Please, sit down. I will explain everything." But Lucas didn't move. His gaze was fixed on me, his small face contorted with pain and betrayal. "Why can't you just tell me the truth?" he asked, his voice breaking. Jeff's patience finally snapped. He slammed his fist on the table, making the plates and glasses jump. "The truth, Claire," he shouted. "No, I don't know," I screamed, the words ripping out of me before I could stop them. The room fell silent again, the collective shock hitting like a tidal wave. "What do you mean, you don't know?" Jeff asked, his voice low and dangerous. Tears streamed down my face as I struggled to explain. "I don't know who his father is," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Jeff stumbled back as if I had physically struck him, his face twisted in disbelief. Then fury. "You don't know?" he repeated, his voice rising. "What the hell does that even mean, Claire?" Mark looked like he might faint, his hands gripping the back of his chair for support. Jenna covered her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. My mother looked at me as though she didn't recognize me. Lucas's voice was small, almost a whisper. "You don't know." He took a step back, his lip trembling. "You told me you did." "I thought I did," I said, my voice. "Lucas, I thought I knew, but I was wrong." Jeff's laughter was harsh and bitter. "Wrong? That's your excuse." He turned to the rest of the family, throwing his arms wide. "She doesn't even know who the father of her own child is, and I'm supposed to be okay with this." Mark finally found his voice. "This has nothing to do with me," he shouted, his face red. "Claire, tell them it's not me." "I don't know," I repeated, my voice breaking. "I don't know, okay?" The room descended into chaos again, voices overlapping as accusations and questions flew from every direction. Lucas looked at me one last time, his face pale and filled with betrayal, before he turned and ran from the room. "Lucas," I shouted, but he was already gone. Jeff rounded on me, his face a mask of fury. "You've destroyed this family. Claire," he said, his voice cold. "You've destroyed everything." I couldn't respond. I couldn't even breathe. The truth had finally come out. But the storm was far from over, and deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The echo of Lucas's retreating footsteps lingered in the room, amplifying the suffocating silence that followed. My heart felt like it was being ripped apart as I watched Jeff, my husband of 12 years, pacing like a caged animal, his fists clenched at his sides. Mark, my cousin, was still frozen, his face pale and drenched in sweat. He looked as if he might collapse at any moment. My father's stern gaze was fixed on me, his disappointment like a dagger to the chest. But it was Jeff who broke the silence. His voice was cold and sharp, each word a blade. "You let him believe this," he said, gesturing toward the doorway where Lucas had disappeared. "You let me believe this." I didn't know what to do. I shouted, my voice cracking. "It was complicated, Jeff. I didn't want to hurt you or Lucas. I thought I could just—" "Lee," Jeff interrupted, his eyes blazing. "You thought you could just lie to everyone and it would all magically work out. It wasn't like that." I protested, but even I wasn't sure I believed my own words anymore. "Then what was it like, Claire?" Jeff's voice was louder now, his anger spilling over. "What the hell were you thinking? Did you ever stop to think about the damage this would cause? To me? To Lucas?" Before I could respond, my father's deep voice cut through the tension like a whip. "Enough," he said, his tone commanding. "This is not the time to yell at each other. Claire, you need to fix this, now." "I don't even know how," I snapped back, my emotions boiling over. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I wanted my son to find out like this, in front of everyone?" Jeff slammed his fist on the table again, making the plates and glasses rattle. "You should have told me the truth, Claire. I deserved that much. Lucas deserved that much." Mark finally found his voice, though it was weak and shaky. "I didn't do anything," he stammered, his eyes darting nervously between Jeff and me. "Claire, you know it wasn't me. Tell them." All eyes turned to me, the weight of their expectations crushing. But the truth was I didn't know. I had been so young, so reckless back then. The memories were a blur, a mess of bad decisions and regrets. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Then who else could it be?" Jeff demanded, his voice dripping with contempt. "Who else was in your life back then, Claire?" My stomach turned as old memories surfaced, memories I had buried deep, hoping they would never see the light of day. But now they clawed their way back, forcing me to confront the reality I had tried so desperately to avoid. "There was someone," I said hesitantly, my voice trembling. "Before I met you, Jeff, but it was a long time ago, and I never thought." "Who?" Jeff cut me off, his voice sharp and unrelenting. "Who was it, Claire? Who else could be Lucas's father?" The room was deathly silent, every eye on me as I struggled to find the words. And then it hit me, the realization crashing down like a tidal wave. "There's a chance," I began, my voice barely audible. "It might have been." Before I could finish, the front door slammed open. Lucas stood there, his face streaked with tears, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. "I deserve the truth," he said, his voice raw but determined. "No more lies, Mom. No more secrets." And Jeff turned to me, his expression hardened, his patience completely gone. "You heard him," he said. "Tell him. Tell us." I took a deep breath, my entire body trembling as I prepared to drop the one truth that could shatter everything we had left. The weight of their stares crushed me as I stood there, my heart pounding like a drum. Lucas's face, tear-streaked but resolute, was a reminder of just how much I had failed him. Jeff's fury radiated like a storm, his arms crossed and jaw clenched as he waited for the truth. My father's disappointment, my mother's silent pleading, Mark's pale terror, each was a piece of this shattered moment. "I need you all to listen," I began, my voice trembling but firm enough to quiet the room. "This isn't easy for me, but Lucas deserves the truth. All of you do." Lucas stepped forward, his eyes locked on mine. "Then say it," he said. "Who is my real dad, Mom?" I took a shaky breath, every nerve in my body screaming at me to stop, to hide, to run. But it was too late for that. "It was before Jeff," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Before I even knew what my life was going to look like." I made mistakes. Reckless mistakes. There were a couple of people. A couple. Jeff's voice was razor sharp, his fury spilling into the room like a flood. Claire, are you serious right now? You can't even narrow it down. Mark held up his hands, his voice cracking as he interjected. It wasn't me. Claire, tell them. It wasn't me. I don't think it was. I admitted, my voice cracking. But I don't know for sure, Mark. I don't know for sure about anything. Lucas's shoulders sagged, the weight of my words hitting him like a physical blow. You don't even know, he whispered, his voice breaking. I thought I knew, I said desperately, my hands shaking as I reached for him. But I didn't want to destroy everything. I didn't want to lose the family we built. Lose it. Jeff shouted, his voice cutting through me like a blade. You already destroyed it, Claire. There's nothing left. Lucas stepped back, his eyes darting between me and Jeff. So I'm just nobody, he asked, his voice rising. I don't even know who I am because you couldn't tell the truth. My father stood then, his voice booming with authority. Enough, he shouted, silencing everyone in the room. He turned to me, his expression cold and unyielding. You need to fix this, Claire. You need to figure out the truth, no matter what it takes. Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. I will, I said, my voice trembling. I'll do whatever it takes. Jeff shook his head, his face twisted in disgust. It's too late for that, he said coldly. You've ruined us. You've ruined him. But before he could storm out, Lucas stopped him. No, he said, his voice steady despite his tears. We aren't leaving this table until we know the truth. Mom, who else could it be? The room was suffocating, the silence heavier than any shouting match. And then, like a sudden thunderclap, a name came back to me, a name I hadn't thought of in years. There was someone, I said, my voice trembling. Someone I was with just before I met Jeff. His name was Michael. The room was still, everyone processing the name like it was a foreign word. Jeff narrowed his eyes. Michael, he repeated. Who the hell is Michael? He was. An old friend, I said hesitantly. We lost touch after I met you, Jeff. I never thought it could be him. Lucas's eyes lit with a spark of hope, desperate but fragile. Where is he? Can we find him? I don't know, I admitted, my voice cracking under the weight of my guilt. But I'll find him, Lucas. I promise I'll find him. Jeff scoffed, shaking his head. This is unbelievable, he muttered. You don't even know where he is. You don't know anything, Claire. Lucas's gaze never wavered, his small frame steady against the storm of emotions in the room. Then find him, he said, his voice calm but firm. Because I need to know. I need to know who I am. The words hung in the air, final and unrelenting. And for the first time in my life, I realized there was no running from the truth anymore. The only way out of this mess was to confront it head on, no matter the cost. The tension in the room was a living thing, suffocating and unrelenting. Jeff's face was a mask of fury, his jaw clenched as though he was fighting to keep from saying something that would burn every bridge left between us. Lucas, however, didn't wait. He stepped forward again, his resolve like steel. You said his name is Michael, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Where did he live? How do we find him? I felt every pair of eyes in the room boring into me, expecting answers I wasn't sure I could give. He was local, I said haltingly, the words catching in my throat. He moved a few years after we stopped seeing each other. I don't know where he is now. Jeff scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping him as he shook his head. Of course, you don't know, he muttered. Because why would anything in this mess make sense? Lucas's face darkened, and for the first time I saw genuine anger in his expression. You didn't think to look for him, he demanded, his voice rising. You didn't think maybe, just maybe, I deserve to know who my real dad is. I didn't think it would matter, I said weakly, my voice trembling. I didn't think. That's the problem. Claire, Jeff exploded, cutting me off. You didn't think. Not about me, not about Lucas. Not about anything except how to keep your lies from falling apart. Lucas's fists clenched at his sides, his anger raw and unfiltered. You've been lying to me my whole life, he said, his voice thick with betrayal. How am I supposed to believe anything you say now? My father, who had been silent since his outburst earlier, stood and placed a heavy hand on the table. Enough, he said, his voice low but commanding. Lucas deserves answers. Claire, you need to fix this. And Jeff, you yelling isn't going to help. Jeff opened his mouth to argue, but the look my father gave him was enough to silence him, for now. I'll find him, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I'll do whatever it takes to find Michael and get the answers we need. Lucas turned to me, his eyes hard. You better mean that, he said. Because I can't live like this, Mom. I can't live with all these lies. I do mean it. I promised, my chest tightening with the weight of my own guilt. I'll find him, Lucas, I swear. But Jeff shook his head again, his frustration boiling over. You better hope you do, he said coldly. Because if you don't, I'm done, Claire. Do you hear I'm done? Dia's words hit like a slap, but I couldn't focus on him now. My son, my 12-year-old boy, was looking at me like I was a stranger, and I knew I had to make this right. I'll start tonight, I said, more to myself than anyone else. And I'll go through everything, reach out to anyone who might know where he is. I'll find him. My mother, who had been quietly sobbing at the other end of the table, finally spoke. Do you even know what you're looking for? She asked softly. Do you know enough about him to track him down? I froze, her words cutting through my panic like a razor. Did I? Did I have enough to even start? Michael was a blur in my mind, a shadow from a reckless past I had tried to forget. I'll figure it out, I said, forcing a confidence I didn't feel. But deep down, I knew the truth. Finding Michael was going to be harder than I'd ever imagined. And if I failed, I risked losing not just Jeff, but Lucas too. The stakes had never been higher, and I wasn't sure I was strong enough to face what lay ahead. The house was quiet, but it was the kind of silence that burned. Jeff barely looked at me, and Lucas hadn't said a word since we'd returned from the clinic. The results weren't just numbers. They were a death knell for the fragile balance I'd tried to maintain all these years. But Jeff wasn't just simmering with anger. There was something in his eyes now that was colder, more calculating. I didn't realize it yet, but he had already decided on his next move. That evening, Jeff spoke for the first time since we got home. I was sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the clock on the wall when he walked in. His tone was clipped, controlled, like someone who had rehearsed what they were about to say. I've made a decision, he said. I turned to him, the weight of the day pressing down on me. Jeff, Stop, he interrupted, holding up a hand. I don't want your excuses, Claire. I'm done waiting for you to fix this mess. My chest tightened. What do you mean? He exhaled sharply, his eyes hard. We're going to have another family meeting, he said. Not just us. Everyone. Your parents, your sister, your cousin. Everyone who was at that table when Lucas dropped the truth bomb. Why? I asked, my voice trembling. Because this isn't staying buried, he snapped. Your lies have hurt me, they've hurt Lucas, and they've hurt this family. It's time everyone knows the full story. Panic gripped me. Jeff, please, think about Lucas. He doesn't need more chaos right now. Lucas deserves the truth, he said, his voice cold and final. And so do I. No more hiding, Claire. This ends now. I stared at him, my heart pounding. There was nothing I could say to change his mind. Jeff wasn't the kind of man to bluff. The next day, Jeff made the calls. He was calm, almost unnervingly so, as he told everyone there would be another family dinner. I could only imagine the reactions on the other end of the line. Curiosity, concern, and maybe even dread. By the time the dinner was set, the weight of what was coming felt unbearable. Lucas avoided me entirely, spending most of his time in his room. I tried to talk to him, but he would only say, "Ask Dad." It was clear whose side he was on now. Jeff moved through the house with a sense of purpose, gathering papers and making notes. I caught glimpses of him printing something off the computer, stuffing envelopes with the same detached efficiency as someone signing routine documents. "What are you doing?" I finally asked, my voice shaking. "You'll find out," he said simply, without even looking at me. His calmness terrified me more than his anger ever had. The day of the second family dinner arrived, and the tension in the air was suffocating. The dining room was set up exactly as it had been the first time, but the atmosphere was entirely different. There was no warmth, no laughter, just a thick, palpable sense of dread. Jeff stood at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Lucas sat beside him, his arms crossed, his face a mask of quiet anger. I took a seat across from them, feeling like a criminal about to stand trial. Slowly, the rest of the family filtered in, one by one. My father, always stoic, looked uneasy for the first time in years. My mother kept glancing at me, her face pale with worry. Jenna and Mark arrived together, exchanging nervous glances as they sat down. When everyone was seated, Jeff cleared his throat. The room fell silent instantly. "I called this meeting," he began, his voice calm but firm, "because there are things that need to be said, truths that need to come out. Some of you might not want to hear them, but that's too bad. We're not leaving this table until everything is laid out." My stomach churned as he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a stack of envelopes. Each one was sealed, and as he began passing them around the table, my hands started to shake. "What's this?" my father asked, frowning as he turned the envelope over in his hands. "Open it," Jeff said simply. The sound of tearing paper filled the room as everyone opened their envelopes. Inside was a printed copy of the paternity test results. My mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. My father's face darkened as he read the document, his jaw tightening. Jenna's eyes darted back and forth between me and Jeff, her expression a mixture of shock and confusion. Mark froze, his hands trembling as he stared at the paper. "I think it's pretty self-explanatory," Jeff said, breaking the silence. "The test confirmed what Lucas revealed during the last dinner. I'm not his biological father." The room erupted into cheers. My mother began sobbing quietly, my father demanding answers, Jenna shaking her head in disbelief. "Claire," my father said sharply, his voice cutting through the noise, "is this true?" I opened my mouth to speak, but Jeff raised a hand, silencing me. "She's already had her chance to explain," Jeff said coldly. "Now it's my turn." He turned to Mark, his gaze narrowing. "Mark, do you have something you want to say?" Mark's face went white. "What are you talking about?" he stammered. "You were pretty defensive the last time we all sat at this table," Jeff said, his voice steady. "You kept insisting it wasn't you. But I have to wonder, why were you so quick to deny it? Unless, of course, you had a reason to feel guilty." Mark shook his head violently. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "Claire, tell them. Tell them it's not me." I froze. "Claire," Jeff said, his voice dangerously low. The room was deathly silent as everyone turned to me, their eyes filled with expectation, judgment, and disbelief. "I don't know," I whispered finally, tears streaming down my face. "I don't know if it's Mark." The words landed like a bomb, detonating the fragile calm that had remained. Mark jumped to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is insane," he shouted. "You can't seriously think." "Sit down," Jeff said sharply, his voice like a whip. Mark hesitated, his face contorted with anger and fear, but he slowly sat back down. Jeff straightened, looking around the table. "The truth is, Claire doesn't know who Lucas's father is. She lied to all of us, including Lucas, for 12 years. And now the fallout from her lies has left us sitting here, wondering if one of us is the father of her child." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of my mother's quiet sobs. "Lucas deserves better than this," Jeff said, his voice breaking for the first time. "He deserves to know the truth. And if it's the last thing I do, I'll make sure he gets it." Bah. He turned to Lucas, his expression softening. "You're my son, Lucas. No matter what happens, that will never change. But you deserve answers, and I'm going to get them for you." Lucas nodded, his eyes filled with tears. As Jeff sat down, the room remained frozen in stunned silence. The truth was out now, and there was no going back. The fallout from Jeff's revelation was immediate and explosive. Mark bolted from the table, his face pale and his hands trembling. "I'm not staying here for this circus," he muttered as he grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. "Sit down, Mark," my father barked, his voice booming with authority. It was rare for him to raise his voice, and the command froze Mark mid-step. "You're not leaving until we sort this out." But Mark hesitated, glancing between the door and the expectant stares of the family. Reluctantly, he returned to his seat, though his face was flushed with anger. Jeff leaned forward, his expression cold and unrelenting. "You've been dodging this since the beginning, Mark. Why don't you just admit it? You had a thing with Claire, didn't you?" "That's a lie," Mark shouted, slamming his hands on the table. "Is it?" Jeff fired back, his voice rising. You've been defensive from the start, avoiding eye contact, shifting the blame. If it wasn't you, then why are you acting guilty? Mark glared at him, his jaw tightening. I don't have to sit here and take this. Yes, you do, my father said sternly. Because if there's even a chance you're involved, we need to know. Mark looked at me, his eyes wild and desperate. Claire, tell them it's not me. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. I couldn't lie anymore, but I also didn't know the truth. Jeff exhaled sharply, his patience clearly wearing thin. All right, he said, his tone icy. If you're so sure, Mark, then prove it. Take the test. Right here, right now. Mark's eyes widened. What? You heard me, Jeff said, his voice steady. I already have the kit. You swab your cheek, and we send it in. If you've got nothing to hide, then you've got nothing to worry about. The room was deathly silent as everyone stared at Mark. He glanced around, his chest heaving as though he were trapped. This is ridiculous, he muttered. Then take the test, Jeff said, his tone sharp. Unless, of course, you're afraid of what it'll say. Mark's face turned crimson. Fine, he snapped, snatching the kit from Jeff's outstretched hand. He fumbled with the swab, jabbing it into his cheek before slamming it back into the tube. There. Happy now? Jeff didn't respond, taking the sample and sealing it with precision. We'll know soon enough, he said coolly. The rest of the evening was unbearable. Mark sat stiffly in his chair, avoiding everyone's gaze. My mother tried to speak to him, but he waved her off, muttering something about needing air. Jenna fidgeted uncomfortably, while my father's expression was unreadable, caught somewhere between anger and disappointment. Lucas, however, sat quietly beside Jeff, his arms crossed and his gaze fixed on the table. He hadn't said much, but I could see the storm brewing inside him. Finally, Jeff stood, gathering his papers and looking at me. This ends here, Claire, he said. No more lies, no more excuses. Once we have the results, I'm done. His words hit me like a blow, but I couldn't argue. I had brought this on myself. As Jeff and Lucas left the room, I sat there, the weight of my decisions pressing down on me. The truth was coming, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face it. But one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same. The results arrived 3 days later. Jeff insisted on gathering everyone again, making it clear this was the final time he would deal with any of this. His calm demeanor was gone, replaced with cold determination. The family, still reeling from the last explosive dinner, hesitated but ultimately agreed to attend. Lucas sat beside Jeff, his expression tense but resolute. Mark was there too, though he looked visibly shaken. He fidgeted constantly, his gaze darting toward the door as if planning his escape. My parents sat stiffly at the table, their unease palpable. And then there was me, sitting in silence, bracing for the inevitable. Jeff stood at the head of the table, holding a sealed envelope. Before I open this, he began, his voice steady but laced with bitterness. I want to remind everyone why we're here. This isn't just about DNA. It's about lies, betrayal, and the consequences of selfish decisions. His words were daggers, aimed squarely at me and Mark. I looked down at my hands, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Jeff tore open the envelope, pulling out the results. The room was so silent that the sound of the paper unfolding seemed deafening. He read the document, his expression hardening with each passing second. Finally, he placed the paper on the table and looked directly at Mark. Well, Jeff said, his voice sharp as a knife. Congratulations, Mark. You're Lucas's biological father. The room erupted into chaos. My mother gasped, clutching her chest as my father shouted, Mark, is this true? How could you? Jenna covered her mouth in shock, while Mark stammered, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Jeff laughed bitterly, shaking his head. You didn't know. You expect us to believe that. You've had 12 years to figure this out, Mark. 12 years of hiding behind your lies. Mark's face turned bright red as he stood abruptly. I didn't hide anything, and I had no idea. Lucas slammed his hand on the table, silencing everyone. Enough, he shouted, his voice breaking. I don't care about your excuses, Mark. I don't care about your lies. You might be my biological father, but you're not my dad. His words cut through the chaos like a blade, leaving the room in stunned silence. Jeff turned to Lucas, his expression softening for the first time that night. Lucas, he said, his voice steady. You're right. Biology doesn't make a father. actions do. And no matter what these results say, I'll always be here for you. Lucas nodded, tears welling in his eyes. Thank you, Dad. But Jeff straightened, his gaze hardening as he looked at the rest of the room. But as for the rest of you, he said, his voice cold, this is where it ends for me. What do you mean? My mother asked, her voice trembling. I mean I'm done, Jeff said. I'm done with the lies, the secrets, and the toxicity. Claire, I loved you once, but I can't stay in a marriage built on betrayal. And Mark, you disgust me, and Mark opened his mouth to respond, but Jeff cut him off. Save it. I don't care what you have to say. Jeff turned back to Lucas, placing a hand on his shoulder. We're leaving, he said, simply. Lucas hesitated. Where will we go? Jeff smiled faintly. Anywhere we want. We're just you and Omi. The tears streamed down my face as they stood to leave. Jeff, please, I said, my voice breaking. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. I wish you the best, Claire, he said. But you've made your choices, and now I'm making mine. As the door closed behind them, I felt the weight of everything I had lost. My marriage, my son's trust, and the respect of my family, all gone because of my lies. But Jeff's final words lingered in my mind. Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away. For Jeff and Lucas, this was the end of one life and the beginning of another. For me, it was a harsh but necessary lesson. Truth matters. Trust matters. And once they're broken, they may never be rebuilt.
He cradled my newborn like he earned it. That's the image burned into my skull. Jason, in his designer jacket, holding my daughter like she was his moment. His second chance. The overhead lights in the hospital room buzzed, mixing with the beeping monitors and the sound of Elena's mother recording the whole damn thing on her phone. And there I stood, 5 feet away, clutching a diaper bag that still had the price tag dangling off the handle. Elena, I said once. Quiet, like a breath escaping. She didn't even glance at me. She was too busy beaming, her voice soft as a Hallmark movie. It's full circle, you know? We've been through so much. He was her ex-high school sweetheart. The guy who broke her heart, and according to her, broke every promise that ever came with it. The guy whose name was a trigger word in our home for the first 5 years of marriage. Now here he was, invited, expected, and honored, holding my baby before I had even touched her skin. A nurse turned to me and said, Dad, you want to? But Jason was already murmuring to the baby, something about how peaceful she looked, and Elena placed her hand gently on his arm. Her hand, on his arm. I took a step back, because if I'd stood there a second longer, I don't know what I would have done. Not to him, to myself, to everything. I took that step back, and something inside me, something deep and rusted and old, snapped in half like dry timber. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled. Oh wow, Elena said, wiping a fake tear. This is just so poetic. Poetic. That's the word she chose for letting another man, her other man, be the first to hold our daughter. Not our priest. Not her father. Not me. The guy who coached her through labor for 12 hours while her epidural wore off and she vomited into my lap. Not me, who massaged her back every night for 3 months when she couldn't sleep on her side. Jason, that smug, teary-eyed bastard. She turned to me then, almost as an afterthought, like someone realizing the waiter was still waiting at the table. Hey babe, she said, still glowing. Do you mind grabbing my chapstick from the bag? Do I mind? I unzipped the bag, pulled out the chapstick, handed it to her. She didn't say thank you. Jason handed her the baby. She took the child into her arms, still warm from his hands, and kissed her on the forehead. And then her mother spoke, as if this were some milestone. Isn't it sweet of Jason to be here? Most exes wouldn't even show up. That says so much. It did say a lot, just not what she thought. I walked over, kissed Elena on the top of her head. I'll go grab some coffee, I said. Oh, get me one too, she chirped. You know how I like it. I knew exactly how she liked it. I'd memorized it before she ever wrote it down. But I wasn't going to the cafeteria. I walked out of that hospital room and didn't come back for hours. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't throw anything across the walls or slam my fist into a parking meter. No, I sat in my truck, stared at the windshield, and pulled out my phone. Logged into the secure drive. Opened the folder labeled Pine Box. Inside were documents I'd been collecting for 6 months, slowly, methodically. My accountant's reports, my attorney's timeline, passwords, serial numbers, video backups. I had labeled everything. I didn't know what I was waiting for before. Now I did. There was a certain elegance in betrayal, if you squint hard enough. A symmetry. She used to say I was too cold, too distant, that I didn't share enough emotionally. Maybe that was true, but in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. Emotion doesn't belong in good architecture, and I was about to raise and rebuild everything. Elena thought she was clever. No, worse, enlightened. Like every betrayal came with a TED Talk attached. It's not infidelity, she once told me. It's just emotional reconnection. That was after she met up with an old college fling for dinner. Without telling me, while I was home fixing the busted sink, she'd promised to call a plumber about 3 weeks in a row. And it wasn't just the dinner. It was the lie afterward. You're being insecure. I didn't even kiss him. It took everything I had not to answer. You didn't need to kiss him, Elena. You just needed to remember how to be someone else around him. That was her pattern. Always one toe across the line, then gaslight her way back to safety. She had a language for it. Processing, emotional closure, intentional transparency. God, she loved the sound of those words. It made her feel like her conscience was a yoga studio. So no, what happened in the hospital wasn't new. It was just the most public, the most humiliating, the most undeniable. But I hadn't waited until the birth to start preparing. I'd felt the shift months earlier. It was in the way she looked at me across the dinner table, polite, but checked out. The way her phone would light up with names she didn't bother to explain anymore. The way Jason's name came up more and more, first as a joke, then as a memory, and then, without warning, as a lifelong friend. She laid the groundwork with surgical precision. I watched, and I didn't argue. I just got to work. First, I contacted an old friend who still did security consulting for a law firm. I didn't need lawyers, yet. I needed documentation, patterns, timelines. I opened a personal checking account under an LLC I'd never mentioned to Elena. Not to hide money, not yet, just to create distance. Then came the document scans. I went through our filing cabinet while she was out at her prenatal yoga class, the one Jason had recommended, by the way. I digitized tax returns, insurance policies, property deeds. Every joint account, every shared liability. I sorted them by risk level. Low, Costco membership. Medium, utility bills. High, our mortgage, our life insurance, her name on my business line of credit. I made a spreadsheet. I gave it a name only I would recognize, Elenium. Every Thursday, while she watched her 3rd trimester sleep podcasts and rubbed stretch mark lotion on her belly, I uploaded another chunk of our life into a private cloud. I even backed it up to a physical USB, which I hid inside an old power drill case in the garage, because she hadn't touched that thing since the day we moved in. The week before the due date, I took my name off a few auto-renewing payments. Subscriptions she never noticed I paid for. Petty? Maybe. But I needed to feel the threads snapping, one by one. When my attorney finally reviewed the full file, he whistled. You sure you're not planning a coup? I told him the truth. No. I'm building an exit ramp. He leaned back in his chair, nodding. Smart. Most men don't prepare. That's because most men still believe in the promises. They think if they play the part, provider, protector, partner, they'll be honored in return. That the vows were mutual, binding, sacred. But vows don't matter to someone who sees herself as the protagonist in a self-growth saga. Elena didn't break promises. She evolved past them. She didn't lie. She protected my emotional space. She didn't erase boundaries. She redefined them, without my consent. And when I tried to speak up, she'd tilt her head and say, You're reacting from fear, not trust. So I stopped reacting, and I started preparing. Every scan, every transfer, every password I changed, it was a layer of insulation. A firebreak. Because when someone starts a slow burn under your feet, you either smother it early, or you get ready to walk through fire with flameproof boots. She had no idea, and that was the point. The car ride home was quiet in that heavy, deceptive way, like the air before a thunderclap. Elena sat in the back seat, cradling the baby with a smug softness, humming some lullaby that she probably remembered from Pinterest. Her mother rode shotgun beside me, chatting endlessly like she hadn't just witnessed my public humiliation less than 24 hours ago. Jason was such a comfort, she said suddenly, turning to glance at Elena with that performative warmth only mothers-in-law seemed to perfect. It really meant something, didn't it, sweetheart? The way he held her. So natural. Elena smiled, didn't look up. Just kissed the baby's head and murmured, he was always good with kids. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. Not tight enough to show, but enough to feel it in my tendons. That's how I measured things lately, not by volume, but by internal tension. What you don't say becomes its own form of fluency after a while. We pulled into the driveway. I parked slowly, deliberately, like it mattered. Her mother opened the door and turned to me just as I was grabbing the diaper bag from the back. Wasn't it sweet of Jason to be there? She said again, louder this time. Most exes wouldn't even show up. I looked her dead in the face. Smiled. Nodded. Then I walked past her into the house I had already half emptied, silently enjoying the fact that she had no clue I'd removed my name from the deed 3 weeks earlier. Signed, notarized, recorded. Official. The house was now entirely in Elena's name, per her request during a discussion months ago when she said she felt psychologically safer if the home reflected her nesting space. I'd agreed. No argument. Just told her, of course. If it makes you feel secure. What she didn't know, and what her mother would never think to ask, is that I'd also removed the lien protection she thought she had in place. The tax shelter her father had recommended? Compromised. The joint title on the cabin upstate? Quietly severed. She still thought we were co-owners of our life. She didn't realize I had already transitioned to a tenant with an expiration date. The baby's room was exactly how she wanted it. Soft green paint, nature-themed decals, ethically sourced crib. I even installed the damn thing myself, piece by piece, while she scrolled Instagram reels of emotionally available dads reading poetry to toddlers. And now here I was, holding a diaper bag I bought, paying for a home I no longer legally owned. Watching my wife act like she'd just performed some great Shakespearean reunion by letting the man who once cheated on her in a Waffle House parking lot hold our daughter first. The most dangerous part? She believed she'd done nothing wrong. To her, Jason was a symbol, a chapter she had peacefully closed. She didn't see what I saw, a woman who needed witnesses to her own evolution more than she needed a husband. And her mother? Just an echo chamber with wine breath and a superiority complex. I'll start a load of laundry, I said, walking toward the hallway with the bag. Such a good man, her mother called behind me, tone soaked in condescension. Always so calm. Elena, you're lucky. Lucky. That word hung in the air like rot. They didn't see the carefully cleaned out drawer in the office desk, or the missing file folders, or the safe in the garage with only decoy documents left inside. They didn't notice the thermostat password had changed, or that the router name was different, or that the guest bedroom, the one I'd been sleeping in just during the pregnancy to help her sleep better, was now completely empty. Mattress and all. They wouldn't notice until it was too late. That's the problem with people like Elena and her mother. They assume calm means content. That silence means surrender. That a man who doesn't yell is a man who's still invested. But some of us, don't yell when we're angry. We just start erasing ourselves from the story. And by the time they realize it, we're already written out of the ending. It was nearly 1:30 a.m. when I stepped barefoot into the garage, the only place in the house that still felt like mine. The baby had just gone down. Elena was humming to herself, curled up on the bed with her nursing pillow and her overpriced aromatherapy diffuser misting lavender into the air like it could fix anything. She thought I was asleep. She always did. The garage light flickered on with that same buzzing delay I'd meant to fix for 2 years. I left it broken on purpose now. Every flicker gave me time to breathe, to shed the mask. The laptop was already waiting on the workbench. Next to it, a fireproof lockbox, a flash drive, and the same legal pad I'd been using since February, its pages dog-eared, full of check marks and timestamps. Step 12, asset transfer. No more simulations. No more prep. Now it was execution. First, the brokerage accounts. I owned 48% of a logistics firm I co-founded with my brother. Elena never cared about it. She used to call it that spreadsheet company, like it was beneath her. I transferred my shares to a holding LLC based out of Wyoming. Same entity I used to open the new bank accounts. Cost me $300 and a quiet weekend of paperwork. Now those shares were invisible to her. Not hidden, just no longer traceable through a marriage lens. Second, the classic truck. A 1971 Chevy C10. The only thing my father ever left me that ran smoother than his damn temper. Title used to be in both our names because she once said, "It makes me feel like I'm part of the restoration." That was a lie. She hated the smell of oil and always rolled her eyes when I talked shop. Tonight, the DMV form was scanned and submitted. Title reassigned. I even booked a storage garage across town, climate-controlled, keyless entry, paid in full for 12 months. She'd wake up tomorrow and see it in the driveway. But 3 days from now, gone. Like it had never existed. Third, the business credit lines. All closed. I had consolidated debt, cleared liabilities, and zeroed every balance. She didn't know I'd pulled out a short-term loan 2 weeks prior and repaid it the same day, just to reset the score. It wasn't about the money. It was about the paper trail. I wanted the books clean. No clause. No strings. No way for her to say she built any part of it. I opened a new spreadsheet. Final sweep. One by one, I typed in the confirmation codes. Printouts went into the lockbox. A copy of each transaction saved to the drive. Passwords rotated. Two-factor authentication reconfigured. New email aliases. Old ones redirected. And I did it all in silence. No music. No whiskey. Just the click of keys and the sound of the fridge compressor kicking on and off across the concrete floor. A wave of anxiety hit me at one point. Not fear. Not guilt. Just weight. The gravity of years collapsing in real time. This wasn't just about a truck or shares. This was the extraction of self. A methodical dissection of a man from a life that had called itself ours, while consistently rewriting the fine print without consent. I stared at the last field in the spreadsheet. Joint savings account, Fidelity CU. Balance, $26,318.74. We'd been saving it for a trip to Italy. Her dream, the vineyard, the Tuscan villa, the cooking classes. She'd already picked out the apron she'd wear. I transferred $13,159.37 into a closed-loop cash fund under my legal trust. Half. I could have taken all of it. Easily. But I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted precision. Measured withdrawal. Documented distance. I didn't want her broke. I wanted her unprepared. That's always what she was. Unprepared for the idea that someone could love her and leave her. I closed the laptop, slid it into the lockbox, and snapped it shut. Outside the door, I heard a faint creak, the floorboard by the baby's room. I waited. Nothing followed. Just the hum of the house and the soft, inconsistent rhythm of her breath through the cracked door. She was dreaming, probably about how full circle everything felt, about how poetic it all was, about Jason. And me? I wasn't dreaming. I was done. The morning sun leaked in through the kitchen blinds, cutting thin yellow lines across the countertop like caution tape. Elena was making oatmeal steel cut, of course, because instant was processed garbage. She was swaying a little while stirring, in that new mom trance where exhaustion looks like serenity to people who aren't paying attention. I watched her from across the table, one hand cupped around a coffee mug I didn't want and hadn't sipped. The baby monitor on the counter crackled softly, white noise and the occasional breathy hiccup from the nursery. It was almost peaceful. Almost. She set the oatmeal down in front of me like a hostess. Blueberries on top. Almond milk. The spoon already in the bowl. Handle turned exactly the way I liked it. "You should eat before it gets gluey," she said. I didn't touch it. Instead, I asked, evenly, "Do you love him?" She didn't look up. She gave the oatmeal one last stir, as if that would buy her time. Who? I didn't blink. Jason. Now she looked at me, and for half a second, her face cracked. Not guilt. Not fear. Annoyance. As if I dragged her out of a pleasant daydream and back into the messy triviality of real-life consequences. She gave a breathy laugh, the kind she used when she wanted to dismiss something without seeming cold. "Don't be dramatic. He's my past." That was the line. The practiced one. The deflection designed to sound like a reassurance but actually carried no weight. She didn't say no. She didn't say yes. She just repositioned herself on the moral high ground where questions like mine sounded immature. I nodded. And I'm your placeholder. She froze. It was almost imperceptible, a pause in her breathing, the slightest twitch at the corner of her eye. Not because she didn't understand, but because she did. She understood exactly what I meant. Not husband. Not partner. Not the man she'd build a life with. Just the one who showed up when Jason didn't. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then busied herself with her own bowl, as if eating would cover the silence. It didn't. The silence had already filled the room, pressed against the walls, flooded into the corners. I looked down at my spoon, stirred the oatmeal once, didn't take a bite. Then I said, calmly, "Do you remember when I asked if you wanted him at the hospital?" She hesitated. "I thought you were okay with it. I was curious. And I told you he was just coming by for a minute. I thought it would bring closure. You didn't think about how it would look." She scoffed. "I'm not living my life based on optics. We're not in high school." "No," I said. "We're not. High school kids usually have better instincts about loyalty." That hit. She set her spoon down, hard enough for it to clink against the bowl. "I am loyal," she snapped. "Don't twist things. He held the baby, that's it. You're making it a thing because you feel threatened." I almost laughed. Threatened. She always reached for that one when the ground started cracking under her. Like my anger was rooted in insecurity, not betrayal. Like my silence was childish instead of surgical. I pushed the bowl away and stood. She watched me, waited for a follow-up. For the fight. For the predictable, "You made me feel like nothing" speech that she could parry with tears or a deflection or a joke. But I didn't give her anything. No raised voice. No broken dishes. No ultimatums. Just a truth she hadn't rehearsed for. "You keep calling him the past," I said, "but the way you looked at him? That wasn't memory. That was anticipation." I didn't wait for a reply. I walked out of the kitchen. And in that moment, I didn't feel angry. I felt erased. Efficiently. Elegantly. Like I was a placeholder in a chapter she'd already edited, waiting to be deleted when the narrative no longer needed my part. She didn't follow me. She never does when it really matters. She came back humming. That's the part one replay more than I care to admit. Her walking in through the front door with that casual, post-walk lightness in her step. The baby bundled to her chest in a sling, her mother trailing behind carrying a reusable grocery tote with 2 green juices and an overpriced croissant. They'd gone to that new park with the wooden benches and yoga moms and ducks that don't act like ducks. Elena was laughing, talking about how the baby had smiled, really smiled this time, not just gas or rim twitches. Her voice echoed through the hallway like nothing had shifted, like nothing had detonated beneath her. But the house didn't laugh back. No smell of coffee. No sports radio playing softly from the bathroom. No humming dryer. No socks tossed haphazardly near the entry bench. Nothing. Just silence. She called out, "Babe." Not loud. Not worried. The way you do when you're expecting a response before you hit the kitchen. Nothing came back. Her mother peeled off toward the dining room, muttering something about warming up the croissants. Elena kept walking, baby still strapped across her chest like a badge of motherhood. She passed the hall mirror and paused just long enough to adjust her ponytail. And then she stepped into the bedroom. That's where it started. The closet door was wide open. She stopped mid-stride. Her eyes hit the left side first, mine. Or what used to be mine. And for a second, it probably didn't register. Empty hangers, sure. But laundry day? Maybe. A reorganization? Possible. But then her gaze moved lower. The drawers. Open. Pulled all the way out. Vacuumed. Wiped. No socks. No belts. No receipts. No tie clips. Nothing. Just space. The kind of space you feel in your throat. She turned, scanning the room like maybe I was crouched behind the curtain with a laundry basket. That this was some kind of joke. But the hamper was gone. The reading lamp, mine, was missing. The framed photo on my nightstand, replaced with blank wood and a faint rectangle of dust. She opened the top drawer of her own vanity. Her makeup was still there. Her rings. The little ceramic dish I made her in a pottery class 3 years ago, the one she hated but kept out of guilt. Everything of hers was untouched. That's when her hand trembled. Just slightly. She put the baby down in the crib and crossed the room to her vanity mirror. There it was. A single piece of cream stationery folded once. Nothing poetic. Nothing dramatic. Just 6 words, written in plain black ink. Raise your child well. I'm gone. She stared at it for a long time, like it might change if she squinted hard enough. Her mother's voice echoed faintly from down the hall. Did you want the cranberry one or the almond? But Elena didn't answer. She was frozen. The kind of stillness that comes not from peace, but from a body waiting to reboot after shock. You can see it in her eyes, math scrambling in the back of her head. Where are his shoes? Did he take his keys? Is the truck in the driveway? And then the crumbling began. She turned toward the closet again and opened the safe hidden behind the coat rack. It clicked open. She peered inside. Empty. That's when her breath hitched. No passports. No backup drive. No insurance folder. Even the heirloom watch I kept in a velvet pouch gone. She backed up, bumping into the crib, startling the baby. Her voice cracked for the first time as she whispered, "No, no, no." She ran to the bathroom. No toothbrush. No razor. No bottle of that cologne she always said smelled like quiet confidence. She tried my number. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. Same. Then she tried my brother. Then my lawyer. Then my mother. Every call ended the same way. Nothing. The sound of her panic was a slow crescendo, shuffling feet, the baby crying, her voice rising into a frantic edge that bounced off the walls and filled the silence I'd left behind. She searched like a woman trying to prove reality wrong. But reality doesn't negotiate. It just waits. And it always arrives. She paced the hallway barefoot, phone clutched in one hand like it might offer her CPR if she pressed hard enough. The baby cried from the nursery, ignored for the first time since she'd been born. Elena's mother stood in the kitchen, frozen mid-sip of herbal tea, watching her daughter come apart in slow motion. She called again. Voicemail. My name flashed on the screen. My voice on the message, flat and familiar. The same one I'd recorded years ago, back when we still laughed at inside jokes and planned Sunday brunches like they mattered. She tried again. Voicemail. No. No. He wouldn't just vanish, she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. Then she called my brother. Twice. No answer. Next, my attorney. Disconnected. Her fingers trembled. She scrolled her contacts. My mother. She actually paused before pressing that one, because she never liked her. Always said she was cold and judgmental. But desperation melts pride like acid. It rang twice. Then voicemail. Hi, this is Elena. I need to speak to him. Please. If you know where he is, just tell him to come home. Or call me. Something. Anything. She hung up, breathing heavy. Her mother tried to say something, some limp offering about staying calm. But Elena raised a hand, eyes wild. He took everything. The files, the safe, that he planned this. The panic was no longer quiet. It was clanging. Visible. She opened drawers, overturned a laundry basket that wasn't even his. She checked the freezer. I don't know why. Maybe looking for some piece of me, any proof I hadn't dissolved entirely. Then her phone buzzed. Not a call. A message. From me. Just one sentence, sitting in its own box like a razor blade wrapped in silk. You said goodbye first. I just waited until you meant it. She read it twice. 3 times. Each passed slower than the last. And then it hit her. The exact moment that sentence connected with every single thing she'd dismissed as oversensitive, distant, or just being tired. The nights I went to bed early without a word. The weekends I spent in the garage under the hum of fluorescent lights. The bank papers I folded and slipped into manila folders she never once opened. The way I stopped reaching for her hand under the covers. The way I didn't argue when Jason's name showed up more and more, until I didn't ask about it at all. Because I had already heard her goodbye. She just hadn't realized she said it. In every eye roll, every he's just a friend, every dismissive shrug when I told her something didn't feel right. She said goodbye when she invited the past into the delivery room and gave him a front row seat to a moment that belonged to us. She said goodbye when she let him hold what I helped create, and didn't even look at me when she did it. So I waited. Not to punish. Not even to escape. I waited to confirm what I already knew. I was a placeholder in a script she'd rewritten to make herself the heroine of her own reinvention. And now? Now the script was over. She dropped the phone. Not with force. Just released it. Like her hand had forgotten how to hold on. Because suddenly, she realized something worse than being left. She realized she was never asked to stay. She sprinted down the hallway barefoot, her phone forgotten on the floor, the baby crying in the other room, her mother shouting something behind her that barely registered. Every step echoed louder than it should have, like the house was mocking her with its emptiness. The door to the bedroom was already open. She didn't bother closing it behind her. She dropped to her knees in front of the dresser, yanked it aside with both hands, the frame scraping across the hardwood with a screech. There it was, the wall safe. A symbol of false security bolted behind a wall of curated linen and sentimental clutter. We picked it out together at a home goods expo 4 years ago. She liked the fingerprint access. It feels like something a spy would use, she giggled back then. Now, her finger trembled as she placed it on the scanner. The light blinked red once, then green. The door clicked. She swung it open and stared. Nothing. Just silence. Cold, velvet-lined silence. No birth certificates. No passports. No USB drives with our taxes, investments, or the backup of her old family photos she never thought to duplicate. Gone. She reached in anyway, like maybe they were just shifted somewhere, hidden in a fold, tucked in a crease. She pushed her hands against the back wall, tapped the bottom with her knuckles, pulled at the corner lip like it might open to some secret compartment she never noticed. But there was nothing. Just air. And a post-it. One of mine. Pale yellow. The kind I used in the garage to mark oil filters or tape reminders to the lawnmower. I had written 3 words in my handwriting. Not yours anymore. That's when the shaking started. She slumped backward onto the floor, legs folding under her. Her palms splayed flat on the hardwood like she needed to feel the earth to prove she hadn't floated out of her body. Her breath came in sharp, rapid pulse. Not sobbing yet, but the prelude. The first signs of structural failure. Because now she understood. This wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't a warning shot or a bruised ego or a man-child sulking in a hotel room. This was complete extraction. She stood, stumbled to the closet, flung open the upper cabinets where we kept the box of travel stuff, expired boarding passes, copies of her old IDs, our backup emergency cash. That was gone too. Not just removed, replaced. With a neatly folded sheet of printer paper labeled Inventory, Secured Property. She scanned it. Her name wasn't on anything. Her laptop? Purchased with my business account. The house? Technically still hers, except for the second lien I'd applied to it 2 months ago under my private LLC. The baby's social? I'd already filed for the certificate without her. She was in the hospital when I did it, still glowing from what she called the full circle moment. She hadn't noticed me leave the room. Hadn't noticed me walk down the hallway and hand off a sealed envelope to the notary I'd scheduled to meet in the hospital cafeteria. Hadn't noticed the second I began to vanish. She sat back down, this time slower. Her back hit the wall. She stared ahead. Not crying. Not yet. But breaking. And the worst part? She had no one to call. Because every safety net she thought existed, me, my family, our friends, our finances, was gone. Not out of spite. Not out of rage, but out of a plan that had already succeeded. The call came 2 days later, mid-morning. I was sitting on the porch of a rental cabin 3 counties over, legs up on a railing that creaked under the weight of my silence. The air smelled like pine and cold soil. My phone buzzed once, unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Her father. I let it ring twice before answering. Not because I was unsure, but because I knew he'd expect hesitation. And I wanted him to hear confidence. Daniel, he said, voice low, tight, like a man trying to stay composed while everything he thought was solid turned to ash. Yep. A pause. This isn't right. I didn't sigh. I didn't bristle. I just let the words hang there, like a wet coat he expected me to take off his shoulders. You've got every right to be angry, he continued. But what you've done, it's excessive. You left her with nothing. No warning. No explanation. I gave her 12 years of explanation, I said, still calm. She just didn't listen to any of it. She just had your child. I smiled without smiling. Ask her why she let another man hold my son before I did. That silenced him. I pictured him then, standing on his back porch, clutching a cup of black coffee like it was a Bible. I knew that look. That particular brand of masculine confusion. The kind that happens when you realize your little girl isn't a girl anymore. and maybe hasn't been for a long time. She said it wasn't like that. Of course she did. She said it was symbolic. That Jason was. A chapter she closed? I cut in. Silence. I know the script, Dawn. Hell, I edited it half my marriage. She wants to be the victim because it's the only way she ever gets to be the center of the story. He inhaled sharply, like he wanted to disagree, but didn't. Look, he finally said. You didn't even give her a chance to make things right. I stood up, walked to the edge of the porch, and stared at the gravel drive. She had dozens of chances. Real ones. Quiet ones. The kind that come in the form of a husband who doesn't leave when he should. Who forgives dinner lies, therapy buzzwords, and backburner intimacy. She didn't want to fix it. She wanted permission to feel justified. She's crying. Every day? She's a mess. She's crying because she lost control, I said, flat. Not because she lost me. Another pause. And then, softer. You left her with nothing. No, I replied. She gave it all away herself. There was no rebuttal to that. Because deep down, even he knew it was true. He knew the way his daughter always needed to be admired. The way she repackaged selfishness as growth. The way she weaponized vulnerability to avoid accountability. He'd watched her do it to her mother, to her friends, to her siblings, and now, finally, to someone who decided not to play the role she assigned. Where are you? He asked. Not demanding, almost pleading. I'm somewhere quiet. Are you ever coming back? I already left, I said, and then I hung up. No rage, no final blow, just the quiet click of a line that would never be open again. The envelope came on a Wednesday, not in the mail. That would have been too impersonal, too forgettable. No, it arrived in the hands of a man in a charcoal gray jacket, clipboard tucked under one arm, expression carved from stone. Elena opened the door in sweatpants and an oversized nursing bra, baby on her hip, hair wild, eyes heavier than the night before. Her mother sat on the couch behind her, watching some daytime talk show rerun where strangers screamed about DNA tests and betrayal. Ironic, if anyone in that house had a shred of self-awareness left. The courier didn't say a word, just held out the envelope like it might bite. For you, he said flatly. Signature not required. Then he turned and walked down the path without another glance. Elena stood in the doorway for a few seconds longer than necessary, blinking like the sun had suddenly gotten too bright for her to exist in. The baby fussed. She didn't move. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Cream-colored, sealed in real wax, like a letter from a different century. My initials were stamped into the seal. She closed the door, carried it to the kitchen table. Saturday. She stared at it. Her mother asked something about lunch. She didn't answer. She broke the seal and found the reality she'd been trying to cry, bargain, and rationalize her way out of for 7 straight days. Divorce papers. Every page was in order. Legal, notarized, precise. No flair. No passive-aggressive language. Just facts. Boundaries. Lines drawn in ink she would never erase. Custody proposals. Reasonable. Joint, but with specific conditions. Financial disclosures. Complete. Transparent. Brutal in their finality. And then, at the back, tucked into a separate sleeve, a single typed letter. Not handwritten. Not emotional. But unmistakably mine. Elena, I chose not to raise a child in a house where I was already a ghost. I loved you more deeply than I ever admitted, and for longer than you deserved. I've been so far trying to meet you where you were that I forgot where I was standing. You invited another man into our most sacred moment, then told yourself it was poetic. It was a warning, one you never heard. I didn't leave out of anger. I left because I finally understood you were never looking at me. You were looking through me. This isn't revenge. It's closure. Sign where indicated. My lawyer will handle the rest. D. She read it once. Then again. Then a third time, slower, like it might morph into something else if she just gave it enough time. She didn't cry. Not at first. She just dropped the letter. It floated to the floor, softly, like a leaf detaching from a branch that no longer wanted to hold on. And in that moment, something inside her finally broke in the way that mattered. Not for show, not for pity, not for attention, but for real. Because she understood, fully and completely. This wasn't abandonment. This was the weight of consequence settling in. The silence I'd left behind wasn't emptiness. It was judgment. Final, quiet, irrefutable. She looked around the room. The crib, the couch, the framed maternity photos she'd insisted we take at that overpriced studio downtown. And for the first time, she saw it for what it was. A set, a stage, one I had exited, and one she was now left to perform on alone.